ALTBAYS.
Yes, you're right. Peace, my brothers and sisters. We're live. ALTBAYS show brought to you by ALTBAYS.nz. What a special day, isn't it? How far are we from Matariki? Maybe like 22 days, something like that, 20 days. It's the 24th of June, very special day for this country, okay? So we got reasons to celebrate in June. There are other things happening, but this is the greatest thing of this month, that's for sure. So we have a very special show on the 22nd, and you should tune in to learn a little bit more about Matariki and be fresh to celebrate on the 24th. It's a pleasure to have you all here. This is our show number 53. Last week I said that there was show 53. My mistake. That was show 52. It was an amazing episode with Mr. Stefan Lindner. If you haven't seen that, go to our YouTube page and check that out. It was a beautiful, inspiring chat with a beautiful man, a therapist and a counselor. And tonight, man, we're going strong again. We got the Germans on board one more time. It's going to be a very special show, so you're up for a treat tonight. Okay? First of all, before I forget, I wouldn't forget. Hi, Brett.
Hello. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I am alright.
I'm all right. How's your day? How was your day?
Oh, it was good. Just worked around the house. You know, it was nice to have a long weekend though. Happy birthday, Lizzie.
Who is Lizzie?
Queen Elizabeth.
What? It's not her birthday, bro.
Whatever.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
Damn. And you still say happy birthday to her.
Yeah, well.
Do you like her?
I don't dislike her, but I don't
That's a good answer.
necessarily like her.
That's actually a good answer.
Yeah.
Because it won't take you far to dislike people.
Oh, yeah, well, I can't think of anything she's done. I'm sure she's done 100 horrible things, you know, but...
Good, I'm glad you know.
But I appreciate her letting me have the day off today.
Do you think she actually made that a thing? Like, do you think she actually was like,
I would say in most Commonwealth countries they'd celebrate her birthday with a day off.
Would that be a way to cover all the shit that she's done? She'll say like, I'll give them a day off for fuck's sake.
Yeah. I'm sure she's had her value. I don't know. I honestly wouldn't know. I'm sure she's had her value in the past.
Okay.
But just like any politician,
Like
I suppose you could call her.
carrying gold on her head, that adds a lot of value to a person, eh?
Yeah, well, it is a lot of gold.
And then it gives the Sex Pistols a reason to write an amazing song, right? As well.
Mm.
There you go. So shout out to the Queen for supporting punk rock.
Mm. And she's pretty much just destroyed the... Well, I wouldn't say she's destroyed the monarchy, but she was the last... she's the last of it, right? Like, she came from a time where it was sort of like big influence and power into the time when, we're going to have Charles. What's he going to do?
True.
You know? So she's probably the end of it, I would say.
I wonder if she would be better than Boris Johnson, though.
I would almost put money on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
Me
I'd
too,
rather
eh?
have her as a Prime Minister of the UK than bloody
True.
him. He's a wally.
Yeah, I came with a lot of jokes and quite prepared to give shit to her, but now I just changed my mind. She would have been better than Boris Johnson. So fuck you, Boris Johnson, before I forget. And fuck you too if you don't like what I said. Nah, I'm joking. It's all good. Hey, to talk about this amazing... Thomas is like,
what an
where
introduction.
am I?
Where am I? What happened?
Why?
Monarchy. Let's talk about Prince Andrew. No, we don't. No.
I want to do it, Prince Andrew.
Let's not talk about Prince Andrew. No.
Okay, so for the people listening to this, for the people who are not watching this show, we have the pleasure tonight to talk to Mr. Thomas Everth. I'm just gonna say a few things, and then you complete your list of qualifications. But teacher, scientist, sailor, masters in physics, going for a PhD in climate change. Wow, what else?
What else? Yeah, good question.
Are you a drummer? Because that's the last thing I'm like, man, he must be the amazing drummer that I don't know yet.
Give me a bucket and a stick. I'll be, I'll be quite good. But yeah, thank you for the introduction.
Thomas.
Yeah. When one comes to a certain age, one is looking back at a bunch of things one has done in one's life, and Yeah, you named a few things. I have a degree in physics from Germany back in the day, 1982 I got that. And in Düsseldorf town where I grew up as well, on the River Rhine, the largest river through Germany, River Rhine. And when I grew up as a kid, we grew up sort of a kilometer from the river. I could hear the river boats going up down the river. And the river was a floating garbage pit back in the day when I was a little kid. You know, there was so much garbage floating down, so much tar and plastic and rubbish on the beaches of the river. And when I finished high school, it got a little better. When I had my finished physics, it got good enough for me to have a swim in the river, even though it still smelled a little bit like dry cleaner, but didn't smell that bad. Like it wasn't really bad dry cleaner. And by now it's better again. So there was quite some improvement we've seen there. Anyway, so I grew up on the River Rhine in Düsseldorf and formed a software company after that, after my physics degree with another physicist, which was quite good, went quite well. We sold a product which was a desktop publishing application back in the day when everybody wanted to have 1,000 fonts and write all this beautiful desktop publishing documents. We wrote this application and it was quite popular in Europe.
Microsoft Word.
It was, it had a text processor inside, it had a spreadsheet inside, it had business graphics inside, and a picture handling system inside, and connect to databases, and typeset it all very well. So we worked quite well with the Linotype company for catalog typesetting or for just desktop work, you know. It's quite a sort of Swiss Army knife of desktop publishing applications back in the day.
What was that on?
On the Macintosh, on the Apple Macintosh. And the first Apple Macintosh was so puny regarding its memory and its capabilities that we had to write the application in assembly language, the whole thing. So we wrote this whole desktop publishing application in assembly language. I don't know if it means anything to you, but that's the basic language which the processor chip itself understands. So it's not like a human readable programming language. So we wrote in like A6, B5, D4, you know, and screeds of this stuff. And basically, because that's the only way to make it go fast enough to do all this back in the day.
Is it like the principles of coding, would you say?
Yeah, it's the base level of coding. You code the CPU
like
directly.
whatever?
Yeah, hexadecimal notation. Yeah, I had nights when I woke up at night and go, I think the bug is there. It should be E5 rather than D6. And then when I woke up, made a note, and sure enough, you know, there was so it was kind of crazy time. So we had a few years of hard work and were successful with that application, and it was quite nice. I met Bill Gates once, and he said, like, I'm selling 1.7 applications per Macintosh sold in America, but only 1.2 applications per Macintosh sold in Germany in particular. And so, well, that's because of you guys. Well, yeah. Anyway, so there was good old times in the late 80s, early 90s, yeah.
Thomas, just going back a little bit, like when you were growing up, when you were a child, do you have memories of Germany not being a peaceful place or people like struggling to get back to a normal life? Can you just describe a little bit of the vibe of being a child, picking up that vibe?
Absolutely, totally. I mean, I grew up, my mum was a teacher as well, and she taught chemistry, geography and sports, later on a bit of mathematics as well. But she was already a beginning teacher in the Second World War. So she was a beginning teacher in Berlin at an all-boys high school. And one of the narratives that I heard from her was that she knew when her high school boys were graduating from high school, they would be drafted to the German army into the war, cannon fodder, and she knew that their life expectancy was 6 months.
Wow.
Right? So put yourself in the role of a teacher, of bringing up this class, you know, and it comes to graduation day, and you go like, well, I don't want you guys to graduate. I want to keep you here, you know, kind of thing. And, there was Nazi Germany. The teachers had to run around with sort of a uniform type of kind of thing, the right kind of brown bullshit color. And if you didn't play with that, you were sent to the gallows as well. You know, if you objected publicly in a school, particularly probably against the war effort, that could have been lethal for a teacher, right? And so, so I grew up with these narratives, you know, from my mum and other family members that were, you know, had an uncle who was in the army. He served in the Hitler army in Africa under this Rommel general, who was the famous desert kind of guy, you know. And so we heard all those stories, you know, and interesting stuff. My father was interesting. He was in the pre-war time in a boarding school, sort of 18, 19-year-old guy, boarding school in Austria somehow, and escaped with a friend. The boarding school didn't want to be there anymore. Parents, whatever, you know, they ran to Italy, went on a ship, and went to Africa. as 18-year-olds, whatever, and hired themselves into a British coffee farm in Tanzania, and lived there for many, many years, learned the local language of the Swahili there, and worked in this British farm, learned English really well, and became a foreman in this farm. Then the war started, so the Germans were interned there. And then stupid him, he escaped the internment camp, jumped back on a ship, and went back to Germany, say, I'm back, the war, And bloody stupid. He could have happily stayed there in Africa, nothing would have happened to him, And then he had to play his role in the war. Luckily he survived. Obviously I wouldn't be here otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so there's some luck factors, who survived and who didn't, Yeah.
Wow.
So I could talk for ages about the war, And when I grew up, I could still see quarters in big cities that were burned out, where they hadn't yet rebuilt it. There were still sort of ruins of buildings that had been bombed, And the whole area where I grew up, Düsseldorf, was heavily bombed. Cologne was heavily bombed. People have seen those images probably. And so I grew up with we just came out of this war, and what have we done? And we deserved all that came our way. As Germans, we went like, oh yeah, well, thank you for liberating us from that regime. For sure. Wow. Thanks for bombing our place. It's a interesting thought process that goes through your mind. Right. Yeah, you bombed our place, but that needed to happen. We needed to have that happen to us to be liberated from that regime that caused 50 million people to perish in the Second World War.
I want to go back there. This is valuable. This is powerful, and I like that we're going there straight away. I just want to remind our audience before we move on that this is a very special show. This is like an amazing opportunity to send a question. Go on our live chats if you think you can add some value to the show with a comment, with a question. Please do. We're gonna try to get through all of them. We have a lot to talk about, but we want to do that. And if you're going on our live chats, if you cannot see the live chats, probably because you're not logged in on your YouTube. And as soon as you do that, you can subscribe to our channel, and this is the best way to support our platform. Okay, we go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. So watch our shows, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ask the questions that you want to ask, and interact with our guests and with us. And don't forget that ALTBAYS.nz is also a video productions company, and we're focused on online content. So if you want to run your own show, and if you think that you have a good idea to become a YouTuber or whatever, we can guide you through that journey. A lot of people have the idea, but they don't have the technical knowledge, or the other way around, they need some support. So just go on our website, ALTBAYS.nz, send us a message, and we will take you there. But back to this conversation, because this is lovely and I don't want to miss the boat. Yeah. I have a question regarding that thing with seeing the chaos and what happens in a post-war scenario, because I've heard so many times from beautiful German friends that schools in Germany, they teach everything about the Second War.
Absolutely.
They're very explicit, like they're very
explicit,
about numbers, how things were done, so it doesn't repeat.
Yes.
History doesn't repeat itself. You got to understand history, right? So it doesn't repeat itself. Yeah. And we are living this time now that people love to guess things and like, but it feels like when you see something, when it's in front of you, you kind of become more compassionate about it and more humane in a way. Is it something that is right to say, like that is a strong thing to actually go back and learn from?
Totally, it's totally important. I think it's there's a term for this, the exosomatic memory. That's memory that's embedded in something outside of your brain that you can see and touch again and come back to again and see again. We have memory inside of us. We have exosomatic memory, sort of a term in academia, that is outside of you. It could be a tree that's grown and you've seen it grow all your life, and there's memory with the tree that grows with it, or it's the bomb crater in the area where you played. We went to every summer holidays when I was very little. We went to an island called Norderney on the north coast of Germany, and there was fortified, of course, in the Second World War as well. Somehow there were some bunkers, and so as a kid we could there's this old bunker there. You see the old bunker, you see some explosion craters in the sand next to it. They were still there, like, well, this doesn't look like a normal dune shape. There's a huge explosion happened there. You see all this. That is called exosomatic memory of what happened. It's embedded in that soil, And I think seeing that is important, and I'm concerned that exosomatic memory has been erased, of course. You don't see that anymore in Germany, unless you go to a museum, which, of course, people should be taking advantage of and doing. But in general life, and the people who lived through these times, they're no longer there. My mum's generation, they're no longer there. There's hardly anybody alive who actually was alive in the Second World War time. Well, there are some people still, but it's the tail end of it, right? And with that memory and with those narratives and with those people, I'm afraid we're losing some of the protective vibe, say, that would come out of knowing about all this firsthand, from firsthand narratives and from seeing. If our society loses this protection, it's like an inoculation against fascism. And looking around the world, I'm astounded as how little of that is actually there.
So not just Germany, you're talking about everywhere as well.
Everywhere, but Germany too. I'm ashamed and astounded that in Germany we have now a strong sort of neo-fascistic kind of drift in some parts of the population, some regions of Germany. And interesting was, after the Second World War, and you guys may know, Germany was divided into 4 zones. Got a bit of a buzz. Was divided into 4 zones after the Second World War: a British zone, a French zone, an American zone, and a Russian zone. And the Russian zone became, is that mine maybe?
Could be. Just put, yeah.
Cell phones interfering. Anyway, interesting physics. Anyway. How did that happen? So, back to the zone. So yeah, the Russian zone was known then as East Germany, and the 3 Western nations, France, Britain, and the US, had their separate zones, but they allowed them to unite together into Western Germany. And Western Germany became a democracy in the shape of Western nations, basically, again, with their own parliament, and later on even an army again. Took a while. Good, And East Germany remained occupied by Russia, became a communist society, which went from the fascism of the Nazi time immediately, without any intermedium, into the fascism of Stalinism. It was the same fascism, the same guns, the same type of people, the same rhetoric, the same, everything the same, just the shirts were different and the flags were different, and some sort of surrounding, like the higher level narrative was different, but the lower level brutality was exactly the same. It was the same people, the same thing, So they never had that opening up to be a democratic society that was free of, I don't like you, you're in a concentration camp. The Russians did this, the East Germans did that as well. And so after the reunification, when under Gorbachev the wall came down, luckily, and so forth, and Germany is now reunited, there are areas in former East Germany, the southern part particularly, which are still prone to sort of a fascistoid kind of mindset. I don't know. I should research it more, and there are probably people out there who can tell you much more about the reasons for it. But we have now a fairly right-wing sort of fascistoid, swastika flags occasionally coming up, even though they're forbidden. That's not part of free speech to have a swastika in Germany. You can't do that. But, there's swastika-like flags that are clearly showing what, it's just slightly different, so you get away with it. And so there are groups out there who are glorifying the Nazi time. And I'm ashamed of it. It's horrible. Yeah.
Thomas, on that, there's a talk nowadays about freedom of speech, and there's even this case that became very famous in Brazil. A podcaster, very huge podcast in Brazil, and the guy, he defended an idea that everybody should have the right to say what they want to say, and if that doesn't sound right, at least he's got the opportunity to be schooled.
Sure.
In a very unfortunate quote, he said that even the Nazis should have the right to have their own party nowadays, so people could say that they're wrong, and that became like a huge thing. They lost all their sponsors and everything. However, there's this guy, and I agreed with what the people said of not supporting that idea, obviously. However, there's this guy, I forgot his name. I was supposed to research that to say it, because he's actually a very smart man. And he...
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Thank you.
I could whine.
We'll do that in a minute.
Swap
what he does, there's a documentary, I'll remember before the end of the show. He's a black man. He used to be a musician, I think, in the 60s, for the funk music, like James Brown and all the area, that era. And his job is to he goes and he tries to become friends with people from the KKK.
Ah, yeah.
Have you heard about this guy? He does an
I've
amazing
seen
job.
him.
He
Yeah.
does
It
an
rings a bell.
Yeah.
It does ring a bell. Yeah.
Sorry?
Is he a big dude, eh?
Yeah. Big dude. And he went to Joe Rogan a few times and he had conversations
that's
with
right, I've
very
seen him.
interesting different
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
And he says that he's like, we got to be careful when we suppress, when we tell people to not expose and express their ideas, because then they feel like this anger and then they want to say even more. So he kind of defends that idea, but from a different perspective. He's like, we got to let people talk, and then we have to try to go and change that. How do you see this paradox of letting people talk because you got to support them, but at the same time, depending on what they say, they can be very dangerous.
Yeah. Indeed, it's an interesting concept. The right of free speech. There's a favorite philosopher, or one nice philosopher that I like to read, Simone Weil. Simone Weil is a French philosopher. She died fairly young in the late parts of the Second World War. She's from France, but she died in Britain. And she had to escape from France. I think she was Jewish, that's right. Yeah, so she was, anyway. So she said something really profound about rights, and as a right of free speech as well, but other rights as well. She said rights don't exist by themselves. They're not effectual by themselves. They're only effectual in relationship to the obligations to which they correspond. So a right is only effectual in relation to the obligation to which it corresponds. So when somebody says right of free speech, I say, well, yeah, sure. What obligation does this correspond to that gives you that right of free speech? Oh, right. So there's an obligation with it, right? Speech can unleash a world war. Like the Nazi regime started with Hitler making speeches. That's where it started. That's where the seeds were laid for the not just Hitler, other people too. But he sort of verbalized it more than others and better than others. He was a good orator, apparently. Sadly. And so it started with that speech, right? And it went on being speech for a number of years and then became actions. And then there were some shootings going on and this and that, and weapons started to appear and all this stuff. So it built up, but it started with speech, right? And we could argue that possibly in the time when the speech was going on, it could have been bent to a different trajectory, maybe, that avoided all this 50 million death, perhaps, right? And probably, most likely. But it didn't happen for various reasons and so forth. So today, when somebody says free speech, I always ask, okay, that's really cool. What obligation do you think you have when you speak freely? Right, harm, I could, and so people think about, what that actually means to have free speech, and I think we are obliged to uphold the right of free speech is another we have to do.
Absolutely.
But then with each act of speech comes, I'm actualizing this right now. I'm speaking to you freely, and so, but there's an obligation with that. I shouldn't incite murder, or
break the law, right?
Break the law is one thing. Sometimes the law is an ass, and you want to say that too. In some countries,
but usually like inciting violence. Is against the law.
That's
right?
against
so
the law.
You'd be like, my freedom
Mm.
of speech is inciting violence. But if it's against climate change, no, I'm not going to bring up climate change.
Now, and then there's this other interesting concept, a concept of the Overton window. The Overton window. There was a guy called Overton. He was a sort of a free market, right-wing, liberal kind of economist researcher, and his name was Overton, and after his name, this concept was coined. It's the window, has a border to the left, a border to the right, and in this window is a spectrum of acceptable opinion that the public will sort of chew and go, oh yeah, that's all right to say. And outside of it is stuff that the public will say, oh, you can't say that, And sometimes, and it's done now strategically, I think, particularly from the right, to shift the window, the Overton window, to the far right in order to make things electable. That actually, I think, well, we shouldn't probably be doing, But if Trump says things that are way out there, totally out there, right, lies and knows he's lying, or knows he's lying, does it anyway, it ranks this window wide open, and then in the middle of it, there's an army can walk through this, and the Republicans can do their bullshit because he opened the window far to the right, and he stood for it. And he lied. The president, now I can say whatever I want, I can lie as he does, and by that he, so and then this act of speech that opened this window has now caused a catastrophe in America. I don't know how they're going to get out of themselves, out of this state that they're in. Right, I'm very, very worried that America will end up one way or the other in a fascist regime.
Do you see any any way out of this situation of that America is on now with the guns policy and people still arming themselves quite a lot?
I don't know. I'm at loss. I lived 5 years in America, right? So back to my own life story. So after the software company that I had in Germany, I spent 1 year in America trying to market the software there. We realized, though, that the American market was so different from the European market that it would have been counterproductive for us almost to stay there. So at this stage, I sold my shares in my company to my mates. It was a good price, and I had a few years of sort of some freedom.
What was the name of the company?
Rect. It was so the initial name was B&E Software GmbH. I was the E. Brenning was my other mate, and then we changed it to Ragtime GmbH. Was the software is called Ragtime, and it's still available in Germany. You can Google Ragtime. Desktop publishing software Ragtime. You find the company, not our company anymore. It was sold later on to some other people. Mm-hmm. It's now running on a small flame just in Germany, I think. They don't do international business anymore, I think. But and so I spent. So after that, it was end of '91. I'd sold this company and then spent another 4 years in America living there. And I worked with friends of mine who were computer linguists. So they combined computer knowledge and linguistic knowledge together, which is very interesting. So it was interested in me to get more into a philosophical space of working with thought and computing, and language defines who we are in a big way. I think we're a language people. Our thought processes are linguistically enabled, right? Basically, at least for most people there. And so this was an interest and is still a strong area of interest of mine. Actually, one of my supervisors at Waikato University, she's a linguist, and so we have a lot of good things to talk about. Anyhow, we'll talk about that more. But so the circle closed itself a little bit. But so I spent these years in America there, and at that time I enjoyed myself there. It was good. I had only good experiences with Americans. Really, I had no. I can't really say of any really bad experience with Americans. I noted some people were carrying guns even then, very rarely though, but you saw somebody carrying a gun. Oh, that's kind of weird, And but it wasn't a big issue then, But now, of course, it is. And my friends who were there over there, they're ripping their hair out. They were like, oh my God, how can this nation that used to be held up as the vanguard of democracy, probably never was really, but that's what they sold themselves, right? We can talk about that too, but we're the democracy, blah blah blah, and now they're basically at the edge of tipping off this democracy table with elections being disputed for spite and just the whole thing. It's horrible, and I don't know. They don't know either how this will be peacefully resolved. Don't know. It's horrible.
Do you have a take on it, Brett?
Just vote Bernie and he'll sort it out.
Exactly. Yeah, but I think
they missed their opportunity.
He's
twice
getting a bit old. Yeah, he's getting a bit older.
Is he though? I don't know, man. Yeah. I think. Well, he had some heart troubles, I think, in the last one during the last election, didn't he?
Yeah. They need some young people in America. I mean, Biden. He's a nice old man, but man, you need some 45, 50-year-olds to kick ass there. Kick ass there, Yeah, you're right.
Well, they need also someone different.
Yeah,
hey, they're also intertwined.
I know.
And I thought that Obama was going to be like a huge change. I was going to be wow. Yeah. Like, look at this. America's changing, and then it was like, just more of the same.
Yeah. I changed somewhat, but
he had his moments.
He had his moments.
I was expecting drastic things, though. You know what I mean? Like, especially for black people. Carry on. Yeah.
But especially in a country that each state is so powerful, it's like an entity. I think the president doesn't have as much power as we think. They do. That's a bit frustrating.
The problem in America is the structure of political governance. The Senate is the problem because each state has 2 senators, I think, right? Irrespective of the population in that state. So a sparsely populated right-wing state in the boondocks somewhere out there, Midwest, Bible Belt, whatever, gets 2 senators in the state of New York, also 2 senators in the state of California also. And so the Senate is, by definition, then almost always going to be fairly right-wing, fairly conservative, and generally run by Republicans. And you get nothing passed. Unless you have a Republican Congress, Republican president as well, then you could get something through maybe, But other than that, it's a stalemate, and the the way they tack counterproductive measures onto other laws that you want to pass, they attack something to it that you don't want to pass, but you have to, it's a horrible system. It's crap.
I understand though. I think when they came up with the ideas though, right? They were like, we don't want radical ideas to be moving too quickly, so they make a system to slow everything down. So that you don't get too much craziness going on. But then when it's like you need something radical, it's like, it looks like
nothing happens. You got one Senator Minchin, who Minchin is the name, right? This Democratic senator who is actually Republican, who is by now dismissed every single measure that the Democrats want to get through the Senate. He has personally been the one who was, there. It's a one vote majority there, so this person could destroy everything there. It's horrible, Anyway, America, enough maybe.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. There you go, America. That's your percentage of the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Now, the cool thing and at the same time challenging is that when we have someone like you in the show, I'm like, oh my fuck, we have so many things that we can talk about. Where are we going? So I came up with a system that I hope it works.
Good.
Let's play a game.
Right.
So, in my view, we're all God, right? Like we're all the universe, and I like to call God and universe the same thing because I think that's a very powerful thing.
Sure.
However, let's pretend that we are the other God, the God that people believe that created things and is that God. So now you're God, Thomas.
What about God?
Biblical God, you mean?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. I'm God.
The biblical God.
Yeah.
So if you had that power and if you had a list of all the fucked up things that are happening right now because you're so good at talking about all these problems that we have to tackle.
Yeah.
Let's check your list and then we can talk about these problems. So what God would be looking after first as a priority of how the world is going down right now? Ooh.
Well,
that's a good way for us, eh?
It's a good way. Give you some break, though. I can talk about that. Well, I don't know. I mean, at the moment,
okay,
at the very moment,
it doesn't have to be like the big one, but like, you know what I mean, right?
I mean, there's always the really important things you put again on the back shelf for a while because there's something really burning right now, and of course, right now there's a war burning in Ukraine, and I would stop that instantly if I had the powers to do so because people are dying every day, and on this horrible war, imperialistic war, and it has to end tomorrow, right? And so that's the first thing I'd do.
What should we be aware of? Because like I'm not a knowledgeable person about what happens in Russia and in Ukraine, and then you get all this information coming from everywhere. So like, where is a good starting point for people to at least make sense of the conflict? Because it's easy to give shit to Russia and to see the US as heroes, and we know that it's actually not like that. We know that there are problems. To put themselves in a position of like having an opinion or understanding, what would you say? What should we be looking for when understanding this conflict?
Oh gosh, I'm not an expert on that, but it's my opinion. Being having grown up in Europe, I've seen the Russian occupation in Eastern Europe. I was a young teenager probably when the Russians re-invaded Czechoslovakia and the tanks rolled into Prague to quell democracy there, and it's happened all over the place again and again with Russians basically imposing Stalinistic measures with their army into any kind of countries that wanted to have the liberty to have a democratic system that breaks free from that KGB rule basically. And Russia is a KGB country. It's not a democracy. It's run by a small clique of people from the KGB. And associated to that, a lot of people got very, very rich. That I played ball with that, and there's a book out about a guy who thinks he knows it all about that, who says that Putin allowed the last sort of group of probably 100 oligarchs to be really, really rich because he has a 50% share in all their stuff. It's quite plausible, actually, somehow. And I think that, and then there's also in Russia, there is this identity movement, like a very right wing, almost like comparable to the Western identitarian kind of white supremacist kind of crap. There's a philosopher there, Dugin. I think the name is called Dugin, out of memory now. And he has the ear of Putin, and he has the ear also of Steve Bannon, by the way. and people in the Western sort of ultra right wing movement as well.
Sorry, who's Steve Bannon?
Steve Bannon is the guy who is behind Trump's right wing movement as well.
Okay.
He's sort of a conspirator of let's get the right wing movement of the world together, and he has been working with right wing people in France, in Germany, in England. He was involved in Brexit. He was it's all those things.
He's a politician then.
He is a
advisor.
schemer behind the scenes. He's a
Okay.
right wing schemer behind the scenes. Steve Bannon. You would have come across him. Google him. He's been in the news a lot.
I haven't, but I'm going to look into him. Thank you.
It's one of those characters who you really would hope would not exist. But anyway, so he also is in the thrall of this Dugin character, and the Dugin character basically told the regime in Russia that you need to get Ukraine as your first building block. You have to have. You need to rebuild the Soviet Union. You need to reimpose Russian rule on all these nations that were erroneously let go into liberty under Gorbachev. And so Ukraine was the first bloc that he told them they had to conquer. That was the first thing. You must do this, otherwise you won't get anywhere. And so that's where we're at, And so for 2 years, Putin has planned this, put the armies around there, put the munition dumps around, all this stuff, But he didn't realize that that the population of Ukraine would fight. I think he thought they would just give up and let Russia run the show. And so now we have a fight, And I, heads up for the people of Ukraine defending their freedom. On the other hand, if they wouldn't, then there wouldn't be a war, but they would be suppressed. They would be quelled. They would be vassals to Putin's rule. Yeah. So what's the better outcome? I don't know. I'm not a judge of that, but it's a horrible situation. And if Putin wins this, then it's not looking good for Eastern Europe or many other nations that have celebrated their freedom since 1991, 92. And they won't lose that. They would like to be free nations where people can speak what they want to say, and the freedom of speech is there, et cetera, right? And
it's a bit of a gateway country too, isn't it, to the other?
Yeah, it's also a very rich country. It's a breadbasket, and coming maybe a little bit towards the climate change issue and the future of humanity. If you own another big breadbasket, that's kind of good, at the moment, because going forward, owning another breadbasket is really, really important, for nations. That's maybe also with this aspect you can maybe understand a little bit what China's trying to do, with their expansion of their navy and all this stuff, like massive expansions, right? There's a reason behind this, It's resources will become constrained, and food is one of those, and high-tech minerals and this and this. And Ukraine is a very, very rich nation regarding mineral resources, food basket, very fertile soils. You have that. You have a big token of the future,
Right. Okay. So we started the war. Where would we go next? I think that relates a bit to the climate, right?
It does a bit, yeah. It does, yeah. So you asked me if I was God. Well, I would, I would somehow miraculously make the climate catastrophe melt away. Yes, because ultimately this is, and I'm not the only one saying this. If you look at the IPCC report, you listen to the United Nations, you listen to climate scientists in our own country, James Renwick and others, a friend of mine. To those people, it is a catastrophe that could end civilization as we know it quite easily unless we get on top of it. Not only our civilization, but also could be detrimental to the ecosystems to a fundamental degree. It could kill a lot of life in the oceans. Because the flip side of global warming due to the carbon dioxide increase and greenhouse gases is the ocean acidification. About a third of all the carbon dioxide we release to the atmosphere ends up dissolved in the water in the oceans, and the acidity has already increased about 30% in the ocean since we started with that. And anybody who's an aquarium knows how you need to balance that, otherwise the fish end up upside down. And so we're going to a point where the oceans might become toxic for some of the life forms that are really fundamental for the food chain in the oceans, and that will have cascading effects that then go on and collapse the ocean life systems possibly. And
Tell us again about the studies that the oil companies were doing that we were talking about before, because I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, so maybe backtrack a little bit. So the effect, we're talking about climate change because carbon dioxide and some other greenhouse gases have such a strong effect on impeding or regulating the outflow of energy from the Earth to space. And that's very important because the Earth has to, on an average day, always radiate to space back what it gets from the sun. It has to go back out. You have to balance the equation. If you don't do this, then Earth will either heat up if you radiate less to space than you get on a day, on average, over a year or two. And if you radiate more away, then you cool off, and an ice age happens, right? So that outwards radiation is really important. So every object, like you sitting right there now, you too. We are here radiating about 100 watt in light.
I might be a little bit more.
A little bit more. Yeah, I'm a little less. Yeah, right. So an object at about 37 degrees, a human being at the square meters of surface we have, we radiate about 100 watt into space. Just sitting here. If you run hard, work out hard, it's a lot more. But And so the interesting thing is that, of course, the Earth has to radiate back to space. The energy gets from the sun. And if our atmosphere only contained nitrogen and oxygen, which are molecules that have two atoms together, these ones are transparent, basically, for infrared light and for the incoming light, right? So if we didn't have the other gases, and I'll talk about those in a minute, in the atmosphere, the Earth's surface would be at about minus 18 degrees centigrade, or that's 254 degrees Kelvin, or whatever. That's a temperature that's sufficient to radiate the same energy back to space that Earth gets from the sun every day. All right? So, but we have these gases in the atmosphere now, trace gases. Carbon dioxide, we used to have 280 parts per million, and maybe some number games as to people understand what that means. We have above every square meter of ground rest 10,000 kilogram or 10 ton of air molecules, about 10 ton. Now 100 parts per million of 10,000 is 1 kilogram. So 100 parts per million of something else in the atmosphere is about 1 kilogram above a square meter. Mm-hmm. So we started out, before we started burning coal and so forth, with about 2.8 kilogram of carbon dioxide above each square meter in the air, somewhere there. And now we have 420 parts per million right now, 421. So it's 4.21 kilogram right now. So we added about 50% to it. That's a significant amount. Now, why is it important? Well, you're a musician, you know that a tuning fork, how that works, it vibrates, right? And carbon dioxide molecules, they are trimeric molecules. They have 3 atoms on it. There's the carbon and the 2 oxygens, or for water, there's the oxygen, 2 hydrogens, and they can vibrate like so. And the vibrational frequencies of those molecules happen to be in tune with the frequency of infrared light leaving Earth to space. In tune with, happen to be like that. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be sitting here right now, because Earth would have been a snowball forever. We wouldn't have had the temperatures on Earth to probably allow the high level of life to evolve that brought us about, right? Mm-hmm. So interesting enough, that carbon dioxide, the fact that these molecules interfere with the infrared light going out is important. And what happens is the atmosphere itself reabsorbs some of this light that goes out to space, and the atmosphere warms up, and then the top of the atmosphere is again at minus 18 degrees centigrade. It's about there. That radiates out to space, because you need a minus 18 degrees centigrade surface to radiate just enough to space to make it all work out, right? But underneath that atmosphere, we are now looking from the base of the atmosphere, not anymore into an outside space, which is at 4 degree Kelvin, very, very cold. We're looking at an atmosphere that is minus 18 degrees. And now we need to push the energy from the incoming sunlight through that barrier, basically. And the only way to do this is to warm up. Then we can push it through. So it turns out the average Earth temperature roughly is about 15 degrees or so, and that matches up with that whole system, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you add more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, then you increase that filtering capacity, and the layer that's minus 18 degrees goes a bit higher up, and you have a higher temperature below, and everything warms up just to compensate for that. And that's what global warming really is. Right? Mm-hmm.
Did you like that explanation?
Yeah, well,
that was gangster.
After a whole life of learning about global warming, I've never heard it explained on a technical level like that.
Yeah, and I have another little example.
It's like there's less snow, reflect less, which I'm sure works less ice or whatever. But that's interesting.
When I give a global warming talk to people, I normally bring a prop, which I didn't bring today, but it's a plastic foil. It's a 1 square meter of clear plastic foil, and then of this very same material I get a 1 square meter of black plastic foil, and I go like, well, the clear foil, you can see me, can you? Yes, because the visible light goes right through it, and the black plastic foil, you can't see me anymore. Why? Because the black dye that they added to that plastic foil to make it a black plastic foil, that is a molecule that's very, very good at absorbing visible light. Very good at that, right? So much that no visible light goes through that. Fantastic, good. So now I say to them, well, if you put those two faults on a kitchen scale, the 1 square meter of the clear and the 1 square meter of the black kitchen scale, the kitchen scale will not be good enough to measure the mass of the black paint that took out all the visible light. It's less than a gram per square meter. Now we added, what did we say, 1.4 kilogram of carbon dioxide per square meter to the atmosphere, right? So, that has a massive effect. It's not just a gram, because carbon dioxide is as good as absorbing infrared light as that black dye is at absorbing visible light. It's as good. It's so good, as a matter of fact, that when I studied physics, we were playing with carbon dioxide lasers, which are glass tubes, and there's a low pressure carbon dioxide gas inside, mirrors on the outside that reflect light back and forth, and you trigger this whole thing by pumping energy into it with a light pulse from the outside, and then you have a carbon dioxide laser. And it's because the carbon dioxide gas interacts with itself and creates this amplification. The most powerful industrial lasers are carbon dioxide lasers. They work because carbon dioxide is so good at interfering with infrared light. It's such a good tuning fork, and it's a perfect tuning fork for that. And the interesting thing, that was known back in 1850, 60 something rather. Was in that time, scientists were already analyzing, quite interested in what is the interaction of light and matter. So they looked at all these different gases and liquids and substances and shot light through it and whatever. And there was this Swedish physicist, Svante Arrhenius, and he knew that carbon dioxide was a very good absorber of infrared light. He knew the spectral curves, whatever, and he thought, we're burning all this coal right now. That was 1890 something like that, whatever. He said, well, what's going to happen? So he worked out, we're going to add this carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So he wrote a paper, which you can find on Google. It's available easily. Svante Arrhenius global warming paper. And so he worked out with pen and paper and calculus painfully over years, and then published this paper, that if you double the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere, you warm the globe up on average by 5 degrees. And by the way, the poles will warm a lot more. There was the paper was published 1897 or something, whatever, So that was the moment when we knew basically that, we're going to double the carbon dioxide content. It's going to get a lot warmer on the planet. And of course, an average warming of 5 degrees, or anyway, he was a bit above what we now assume will happen. He was a bit above, but still within the range, innocent enough, within the range of error of our best
and he didn't
climate
have a
models.
calculator.
No, he did. Well, he had a pen and paper, a slide rule.
Yeah.
By the way, when I went to high school, we had slide rules. There was no such thing as a calculator. No, we didn't. Slide rules, pen and paper, calculus. That was what we did.
Poor you.
No, it was good. No, I don't know. I learned something that the young folks these days don't get.
Thomas, what's the relationship with what you're saying? You mentioned before that I think you mentioned New Zealand, saying that changing the way that we create and consume the energy will actually be good financially, will be good for the economics, but it actually doesn't work like that.
Well, so to combat climate change, basically back to that, it's a huge problem. We need to get on top of it, must get on top of it, right? So many governments around the world now issuing plans and so for us to forecast how are we going to ban this dragon, how are we going to get the dragon back in the box, how we get off these fossil fuels, right? And so New Zealand too, we have a Zero Carbon Act that was enacted a few years ago, 2019, I think. Should know it anyway. Zero Carbon Act. And which stipulates that we should have net zero emissions, and then it's in concept, net zero emissions by 2050. That means whatever we're still emitting in carbon dioxide, at that time we have to draw back out the atmosphere by measures such as planting more trees and so forth. We might get to that in a minute. So now we have, based on this act, we now have made an emissions reductions plan that says how we're going to achieve the stipulations of that act. What do we need to do, right? And the plan was just released this month. I haven't read every single page yet of it, but glancing over it, it is surprising to find that on most pages it's like, this will stipulate economic growth. That's like on every second page it talks somehow about economic growth in the context of somehow achieving net zero carbon emissions. And to me, this smacks of incomprehension of the problem is so much bigger, and economic growth, perpetual economic growth, it will not be possible. There's one remarkable lesson I give to my students normally when they're sort of year 9, 10, 11 or something, when they're learning about interest, So I ask them, okay, so if you take $1 and we invest this $1 at 7% interest, and we had invested it 2,000 years ago at 7%, it's just $1, So by now, after 2,000 years, we should have quite a bit of money, wouldn't we? And I don't let them calculate, right? It's actually, anyway. So now just guess, if today I would take this money, what do you think it might be worth? If I buy gold with it, would you be able to carry that gold away? By the way, you're allowed to ask your classmates to help you carry that. Would the class be able to carry that gold away? We can buy for that. And they're like, oh, yeah, I think I put it in my backpack maybe, or maybe if my mate and I we can, Anyway, so we hum and haw about it, and it's incomprehensible. The amount of gold you could buy from that money would require you to convert every single atom in the known universe into gold, and you wouldn't have enough. That's 2,000 years of perpetual economic growth.
In my mind, I was like, I think I can carry it.
Yeah. I reckon. I'll find a way. Yeah. No, you need to convert every. And so then I asked the kids, well, what do you know about history? There was the Egyptian civilization. They built pyramids for the better part of 4,000 years. They had a civilization that long, and then the Aboriginals, they were running around Australia for 40,000 years. They had a civilization there for 40,000 years, right? So 2,000 years, so that didn't work with the gold, right? So how short? And turns out, you have a few hundred years before it becomes ridiculous, but you have to sort of have gold off the crust of the earth. So, it's ridiculous, right? So the kids quite quickly realize perpetual economic growth is just completely bananas when you can't convert every single atom in the universe into whatever you want to have, It's ridiculous. So, we are, after 100-something years of burning fossil fuels, now already at the wall with this exponential growth paradigm. The culture of exponential growth that brought us to this day today has brought us to the wall, with things. And what needs to happen is we need to have a cultural change. Dare I say a cultural evolution, but that's probably what it entails in a way, to really realize this is what caused the problem. The idea that we need to grow every year by an X percentage of what we had before. And of course, to get away from that, we have to change the financial system totally, because as Anna mentioned also in her session, I think a little bit, is if you demand X percent interest on the loan you take out, then you have to bigger everything every time you do that, right? And that's one of the reasons why we have these issues, that we always have to get bigger, otherwise it doesn't work. If you don't get bigger, it doesn't work. And of course, many of the loans taken out today will never be repaid, because what a loan really is, a loan is a entitlement to a resource in the future. I'll have that money back plus some extra, and I'll buy myself some fuel from my whatever, That's what it entails to, an entitlement to a future resource. But we won't have the resources in the future, right? So there will be money there that's owed, and there's nothing there to spend it on, basically. Because we're running into a time of diminishing returns, diminishing resources. So that climate reduction plan, to me, economic growth, misses the margin by a wide shot. Interesting enough, for New Zealand, it may actually work out. I'm taking my words back there a little bit, because we are a small nation with 5 million people on a scale of a country where Germany has about 60 million people, pro rata wise. We're endowed with lots of hydropower. We have geothermal power. We have a good wind resource. By the way, the electricity companies have about a dozen major wind farms in the drawing board, consented years ago, not built. Why? Because they want to still milk money out of Huntley and stuff like this. There's sunk assets there. So anyway, we could probably produce a lot more electricity, or all the electricity we need, with help of the renewable resources. Solar is coming into force now as well. We have a 100 kilowatt system on our school, which is small, but we have in the planning now a large solar farms in New Zealand that will add grid scale solar power. One here in Whitianga down the road, right, will be built, I think. And we will be able in New Zealand to possibly even grow, despite the fact that the rest of the world will be, or many parts of this will look quite different. Yeah.
My question on that is, if we might even celebrate that in a few years. We'll be like, yay, cool, look at us, we did it. But then how long is it going to take for the problem of the countries who did not do their part to affect the whole world? Because we're in the same shit.
They might not even be able to do their part either. Yeah. Like I doubt that China, for example, could produce enough renewable energy to supply their factories, right? They must be
China,
they must
India,
crazy.
India, Russia. There's.
What's your perspective on nuclear then in that case?
Interesting. countries that have invested early into nuclear, like France, looking reasonably pretty at the moment as long as nothing goes wrong. Mm-hmm. But as we've seen with Chernobyl and also with Fukushima, things go wrong that nobody thought would go wrong. People thought this is very, very safe. We're on top of this. We know it's dangerous. We've got all these fail-safe things there. And a tsunami wave caused a major disaster of multiple reactors burning through in Fukushima, Chernobyl, etc. So the technology is, the risks are inherent, and small risk, huge consequences. So it's a risky business. The other thing is we cannot build those things quick enough. It takes an enormous amount of effort to build one of those things, and we can bang out solar panels now by the square mile. But we can't build these nuclear power plants. There's no hope that we'll build nuclear power plants in anywhere near the scale required to do a transition, but we can probably do a lot quicker stuff with solar and wind, actually.
So the problem I see with that then is, what about at night time? So, I mean, that's I think it's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question. It's no, isn't it? Yeah, we got lights on. To
be fair, the world's always half light. Half the world's always in the sun. There's a lot of surface area.
So there are battery technologies obviously possible. There is one of the first large grid-scale batteries was built by Elon Musk in 100 days in Australia.
The Gigafactory, whatever it's called. Something like
that. That thing has paid for itself in a few weeks. It was incredible. What they do there is they charge it up when the power is cheap, and they sell it when the power is expensive. And they're making millions with this thing.
He wants to build, I think, 100 of them or 1,000 of them or something. Difference.
And the battery technology that one needs for this can be quite different from the batteries that we're using in cars. I mean, I think this one day in Australia is still a lithium-ion battery similar to the car technology, I think, in a way. But you can make flow cell batteries and others that are stationary batteries. They're huge tanks and stuff, and you can scale them up quite easily. And so there is technology out there to make grid-scale battery storage, not for like a month ahead of time, but for the night bit, day, night, day, night. That's one thing. The other thing is in some countries, in Australia, for example, you have different time zones, so you can actually send back via very efficient DC power grids, even superconducting cables possibly in the future. You can send back energy from the Australian west coast to the east coast when the sun's still shining there, and vice versa. Those things can be done. There are ideas of beaming solar energy from the Sahara Desert to the north in Europe. There are ways of using thermal storage, like you can, in the transition of phases from liquid to solid, a lot of energy can be stored and regained, a lot, huge. So there are these phase change materials that you can warm up and liquefy, and then you cool it back down again and make it solid again. You get an enormous amount of thermal energy in and out of these things, much more than just warming up water, way more, in a factor 10, 100.
I've seen one with sodium, I think, where they try and do something with that.
Yeah. So there are technologies that we can use to store stuff, certainly over the night, the day-night boundary, and possibly geographically by running cables from the Sahara to the northern Europe or something. So, and solving climate change is a puzzle game, right? It's a puzzle game of many, many puzzles that have to come together. Like one of them is electric cars. Well, we have to get off using petrol in our cars. Otherwise, we are still emitting those gases. So electric transportation, I think, is one of these necessary puzzle games. But the other one's necessary as well, like getting away of fossil fuels from the power grid, as we talked about, right? And so there are many, many bits and pieces. And so the hope is that there are some really good puzzle pieces already on the drawing boards. We know a lot about these sort of things, right? And we could possibly do it. But one thing we discussed earlier perhaps is one worry that I have, and that many people have, is that we're still thinking ourselves too lucky there, because one of the main issues of energy is the old analogy of the fox who goes hunting for prey, right? The fox goes hunting, and when he goes hunting, he expends energy running around and he's hunting. And he gets the prey, he eats the prey, recharges his own energy store. Now, if the prey is too small and he has to run too far, the point will come where the energy returned to him by eating this prey is less than the energy the fox has expended to try to chase it down. And very quickly, when that carries on, there will be no more fox. He'll be too tired to go hunting, and then he dies, stops. And with energy generation, it's the same problem. You need to bring energy with you to dig for more energy, to make more energy available to you. And in the early days of the oil industry, it was like for one barrel of oil of energy, you could get 100 barrels of oil coming out the ground, shooting at you by itself. Like, wow, fantastic, right? It's a 1 to 100 ratio. That was bonanza, it was unbelievable. But that has declined over time. And with oil, we're looking at the moment on average about a 1 to 20, which is still really, really good. So 1 barrel of oil, 20 barrels of energy out, really good. But with some technology, it's a lot less. Like with the fracking technology in America, it's a lot less than 1 to 20, I think. Don't catch me with the numbers exactly, but it's already less. And with some of those new technologies we need to have to power our society without fossil fuels, that energy returned on energy invested on energy returned ratio is getting worse. And it's getting with solar to the order of maybe sort of 1 in 7 or something like this, which is already not so good anymore. With wind, it's maybe a little better, 1 to 10, maybe 1 to 15 is offshore wind, not too bad. But as a society as such, people have argued that your energy branch of your economy has to have a return of at least 1 to 5 in order to make the rest of the economy work, to power the rest of it. You know, you have the energy part and you have everybody else. You have education, you have hospitals, you have food generation, you have all these other things, right? Building and so forth. You have to power also. So if the energy branch of your society is not better than 1 in 5 of energy invested to energy returned, civilization will collapse. That's about the limit, right? And so we're inching towards that sort of territory, in particular if we are thinking that we will build all these new modern technologies with the use of new modern technologies, right? Yeah, get me? So that might not work out, because if we not only have to run civilization, but also build all this stuff that we need to run civilization in the future using this alternative energy, the equation may not work out. It may not work out by quite a long shot. Yeah. And so what we should really be doing at the moment is use every single drop of oil that we can still burn to make.
I love this. Hit us. We're ready. You ready for this?
You should use every single. So stop your car. Park it with it. Use every single drop of fuel we have that we can still burn in the atmosphere before we make the global warming problem too bad for us to ever solve again. Every single drop of this that we still have that's easily available energy should be spent on making the energy technology of the future, because we will never have that inheritance again. Well, it's the one civilization's lifetime inheritance, these fossil fuels that we pulverized. We're still pulverizing. There's people flying on with private jets, or when you see one of these Riviera boats going out from the waterways to the ocean, they're burning 200 liters of diesel an hour. 200 liters of diesel an hour would get an average family probably 3 months or something like this.
Thomas, but then we get to the lifestyle, to the system we live in, to the ego, to the consumerism, and it feels like all of us will have a good excuse to not drop something that it would help a lot. Yeah. So we asked this question to Anna Horn, and she's a very positive, optimistic person. And there's even a question I think from Dana. I'll read it again soon. Yep. But this thing with what do we do? Because it's easy to become a pessimist, but it's also easy to not give a damn. It feels sometimes like we're stuck in this stuff, because if it comes from the top, if it comes from the people who have more power and control over us, explaining how we're gonna change lifestyles, but then they change lifestyles.
Yeah,
because it's easy to tell what to do, but not to do. And I'm just amazed with how we were making jokes about monarchy and all that stuff for a while at the start, because for me that just sounds a ridiculous system of ostentation, of showing off and not caring about what's happening. But we're living on the same thing still, with capitalism, and not giving shit to capitalism. All the systems around out there have people who are doing just too much out of the resources that we have. Can you still be optimistic about changing? Because it seems to me that changing people's minds is the hardest part there. Exactly. Am I right?
Totally. And that's why I'm doing the PhD I'm doing a PhD on climate change education. And in a nutshell, really what I'm on about is to realize that normally education is culturally reproductive. That means educational systems are designed to reproduce the society as it was in the past. The parents want their kids to turn out the same they were themselves, and maybe just a little better. There's some sort of, we tinker at the edges and we do some reforms and things. But generally speaking, education is culturally reproductive. But as you say, And as I would agree that the culture of exponential growth, the culture of the systems that we took for normal, like I've grown up on the cliff face of exponential growth. So have you. We have normalized a life on the cliff face. Like imagine climbing the Eiger Northwand, and that's all you have for your whole life. That's you normalize that. Oh, that's what is normal, right? Totally normal. That's what we normalized, right? And completely abnormal, like a time in history that was never before and will also never be again. It's a very short blip in the history of this planet where this massive exponential change of everything happens, and we go, oh, that's just normal. No, it is not. Anyhow, so to get off this is an educational problem, right? And so in order to help us with that, I think we need to get away from culturally reproductive education to culturally transformative education. And of course, that's how do we do this, right? So I'm not here to say how to do this.
Can you say that again? Going from culturally,
we need to get from culturally reproductive education that perpetuates what we have been doing to a culturally transformative education system that actively transforms society to the point where we might survive this debacle, and create a society in front of us collectively, consciously, that is able to live with much less probably and live consciously in harmony with the world around us. So that bending of the education system to me is paramount. And I've argued with people from the University of Waikato with the powers to be in New Zealand when these drafts of these emission reductions plans were drafted. We could comment and we said, look, whatever you do, you must preload whatever you propose with a massive push in education, because you cannot just table a book of policy to people and this is what you need to do if they don't understand why. Mm-hmm. And if they are really, really calling for it. You want to be, the people want to be ready for, yes, give me this. This is what, but again, hasn't been done. When you look at education and there's mostly, you're going to educate people for the new type of jobs that are in this new, yes, that's important too, to educate the right jobs for the right things. But the fundamental question has completely been, it's blown past their mind. And I'm sad to say that we haven't yet realized that education, in my mind, is one of the key levers. Everything's educational. This dialogue is an educational dialogue for me and for you, for the audience, right? Every interaction you have is educational. From morning to evening, everything is like, I learned something new again, or taught something, everything is educational. So it is an educational process to survive this. It's an educational process. If you fail at that, we're going to fail, right? So, yeah.
Is that something that needs to come from individual educators, or is that something that most likely will have to come from the top?
It would come from the top, I think, but Top is a hard call. In New Zealand, we have a system whereby school managements have quite some leeway as how they structure the way things work in their school. Mm-hmm. I work with participants for my research from a variety of schools, and I see various different things. And so principals and senior management teams have the power to say, well, our school will be, the focus of our whole school will be sustainability for the next millennium. We want to make sure that our children feel that we are doing the utmost to make this thing survivable. This is the mantra of our school. This will be the creator of our school. We now task the teachers of our school to come together and form a curriculum, form a school curriculum, form courses that cater to that ideal, to educate the young people to the point where they feel, yes, the old people are with us and we together create the world we need to have together. And we're not adding it on to a little sub-subject. We do a term 1 in science, year 10 we do global warming or something. That's not what this is. It has to be a fundamental, dramatic change of what the perspective of education is. What is education for? It has to be for that, in my mind. And so schools have that ability. There are schools in New Zealand who say, well, yeah, we're going to do this to some degree, luckily, but others don't. And so with that liberty in mind, because school principals can interpret the curriculum, which is a nice document in New Zealand, they can interpret it in various ways. And they can then document to the ministry saying, we have done this coursework and it matches what you want, but we're doing it this way. Right, and that's possible. And as teachers, we can do this too. But most often, teachers are stuck in a system that requires them to do the same or again and again. And it's very hard for teachers to have the energy to.
A lot of bureaucracy as well. A lot of papers. A lot of.
Yeah. And the culture in quotation marks here of assessment is also something that's holding education back to transform itself, because we have to assess to stuff that maybe is no longer relevant, or assessments to contexts that aren't relevant, but we have to assess whether the credits have to be given. And at the end of the day, the outcome for school education for a kid is, I got 120 credits at excellence. Yeah, what have you learned? I don't know, but I've got 100,
Got the credits.
Good memory.
Yeah.
Sounds like me when I was at school, man. I would study the day before to make sure that I could remember, do the thing.
That's good.
And look where I am now.
Yeah.
Clearly didn't work, my technique.
You can afford Duff beer, that's good.
Hey, I got this from a friend, and actually you can put your, I don't drink anymore, but look, it's a thermal pocket.
Oh my God.
Yeah, gangster, eh?
That's keep the Duff cold.
I know, right?
That's great. Yeah.
So, are you optimistic?
Well, there's a Chinese proverb: "May you live in interesting times." So I'm blessed to live in very interesting times. You know, I'm blessed to live in a time. All my life was lived on this exponential cliff face of exuberance in some way or the other, and I feel blessed to live in this time too. This is the time that humanity breaks it or makes it. You know, if we carry on as we were, we're going to be slapped left, right, and center by the effects of climate change to the point that we won't know what our end is. You know, and by the end of the century, for sure. You know, because people sometimes don't get how hard this will get. You know, people hear like, oh, we might warm up on average of 3 degrees. What's that? You know, we have winter and summer changes by way more than that. What's the point? You know, but of course, 3 degrees is an average temperature change, and the globe is 75% oceans, and over the oceans the temperature change will be not very much, because the oceans are such a lethargic, slow changing thermal mass. So the majority of climate change will happen over land masses. So if you say 3 degrees on average global warming, then the Indian subcontinent may warm by 10, 15 degrees, you know, or Australia, to the point where people literally can't live there.
In the Arctic Circle and Antarctica.
Yeah, there's enough ice on the poles to raise the sea level by 70 meters. Hamilton is at 40 meter above sea level. So, yeah, that's...
Thomas, I mentioned this documentary before. It's called the Third Industrial Revolution, and it's from Vice. Fantastic channel,
really good channel. Yes.
And this guy, his name is Jeremy Rifkin. He's a social and economic theorist, and he's a very smart guy. I know that he works closely to the German, is it Prime Minister that you call the lady, President? Sorry.
Angela Merkel.
Yes.
The former Prime Minister.
Yeah, former Prime Minister. I won't go into details, but like I remember this part that really got my attention. Yeah. He says that what might happen is that we're gonna get to a point where humanity is so already connected, and we will understand that we're gonna have to work as humanity, not as nations.
Exactly.
And he sees that as a very interesting point in our evolution. Yeah. The time that we connected so much and so well, that hope might come from there. That shit will be like in our necks, and we'll be like, we gotta do something in a global level. Do you think we're close to that?
I think there's a lot of things are galvanizing. I mean, the whole student climate strike movement, Greta Thunberg, made a massive impact, right? It really rattled the school systems. And in my research with my participants, I can see how different schools reacted so differently. You know, there were schools who literally forbid their teachers to mention the fact that there were climate strikes happening. The students have to be at school, and the teachers were forbidden to, on their personal social media, advocate for that. Even though the teachers were a climate activist teacher like myself. And I go, oh my God, this is an important point. No, the principal said you cannot possibly, that's, anyway.
Could they really reprimand you for that though?
Yeah, if you have an instruction from your principal not to do something and you go against that, it could be not so good for you. Yeah.
Get a warning though, right?
Get a warning. That particular participant, I thought he was at the border of resigning. He actually then, a year later resigned from that school, that participant, and now somewhere else. But never mind. And other participants were at a school where the principal said, let's hire a bus. And then more kids wanted to go to the strike. Let's hire more buses. So they hired lots of buses and bused the high school students to the climate strike in Aotea Square in Auckland. And the kids came back with an enormous amount of understanding and engagement, and they felt fired up. Yes, the adults are with us. We're together. We're going to solve this. So much hope was created in that moment, for those kids. and experience and learning. It was the other school kind of deterritorialized the teacher. The teacher felt no longer home at that school. The kids went like whatever, and awkward power relationships had to play itself out at that school, where this teacher had to then not talk about the whole thing either at school, which meant that he depowered his students who wanted to hear from him, perhaps, the whole thing. And then in the other school, the territory of the school was wide open. The Aotea Square was part of the school at the moment, and everything that happened there became part of the school. It was encompassed in the school. It was explored, and that's how we should do it anyway. But yeah,
Thomas, we live in an area where fishing is a big thing.
Yeah.
Actually, in
Totally.
the whole New Zealand, and there's a lot of countries that rely on fishing, I
Yeah.
would say. I remember you being in one of those meetings, the fishery, I think it was about the lobster thing.
Yeah. So
Can you take me through that story and then talk
Yeah.
a little bit about the damages
Sure.
of this commercial fishing?
We can do, yeah.
Please.
So in 2021, a year ago, a couple of friends of myself got together and decided that we reached some critical point with the health of our oceans around us. It was also coming off the back of the state of the Hauraki Gulf reports from the Hauraki Gulf Forum, really good reports. I encourage people to go to the website of the Hauraki Gulf Forum and download those reports. They're awesome reports. And the decline of sea life in our environment here in the Hauraki Gulf area in particular is dramatic. And we've lost significant percentages of some key species. We lost very early in the game last century. We lost the mussel beds in the Hauraki Gulf, in the Firth of Thames. They were scraped away, and it has cascading ongoing effects for life that depended on those, etc., etc., etc. And for our environment here, one of the key species that we've been talking about lots is the scallops and also the lobsters. A scientist from Auckland says that rock lobsters are in the Hauraki Gulf area as such functionally extinct. They're not extinct, but he says functionally extinct, meaning that the density of them is so low that it's not clear how they're going to get really repopulating themselves again in the way they should do. And all based on the massive amount of fishing and overfishing we had. And so we decided to make an evening and call speakers in. So we called the CEO of the Hauraki Gulf Forum in. We called Joe Davis from Ngāti Hei to talk to us about the tangata whenua aspect on the health of the oceans out here. And we had a bunch of people. We had a scientist from Auckland University come to talk. And then sort of self-invited, or somebody invited a guy from the Rock Lobster Fishing Association also to come to that meeting. It was a big meeting. We initially planned it to have it in the Monkey House Theatre there. We expected sort of 50, 60 people to come maybe. And luckily, the owners of the Monkey House Theatre had double booked us, which they apparently have done consistently, because he had a book for bookings and she had a book of bookings, and they always booked anyway. So we were double booked. So in the last moment, basically, we went over to the C3 church on the other side, which was a blessing because we got about 300 people turn up.
It was a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, hallelujah. Anyway, that's a good pun. Anyway, no, we're extremely grateful, and I say that again, we're extremely grateful to the people from C3 Church to host us. Thank you, C3 Church guys, for hosting us. Fantastic venue, by the way, for those things.
I think they sold it. Just on a side note.
The C3 Church sold
Jesus?
it? No.
I don't know. Carry on.
The church sold. No, I thought the Monkey House Theatre.
Monkey House. Oh, okay.
I think the church still there. Anyway, but yeah, thank you guys. It was a fantastic venue, and so we had, I think, 300 people showed up. It was too many to hold them in the hall. There were people piling out the sides, and one of the persons showed up was Clark Gayford, the Prime Minister's partner, and quite amazing. So we had a full-on evening, lasted for quite a while, and threshed these issues, particularly the issues of lobster overfishing and scallop overfishing and so forth. And it was interesting. And the representative from the Rock Lobster Association, he held an interesting presentation. He showed a graph of the rock lobster fishing results that ended in 1994. which was one of the high points of what they're called, and everything thereafter, where it goes dramatically down to a very, very low level, was not on his presentation, which later on we sort of eked him out. Well, what on earth did you actually think you were doing here? Because this is we're talking about today, we're talking about that anyway. So And so it showed an enormous interest of the population here in Whitianga and the surrounding areas to be involved in activism to keep our oceans healthy and to make sure the species we have now in our oceans are there for our children to enjoy as well, and so forth, and to stop this decline. And then in the back end of this, luckily, then the scallop rahui, which initially was initiated by Joe Davis and Ngāti Hei here for the local area here, was then extended to the entire Hauraki Gulf, minus, unfortunately, some scallop beds around Little Barrier Island, and in the Colbert Channel there's some beds still that they are still allowed to commercially harvest, and people generally are not quite happy about that because these are still interesting beds that are important for the survival of the species. And so yeah, it's quite critical. Nobody knows really how quickly scallops will, or if they will, and how quickly they will regrow to a sustainable, harvestable population. Don't know. It will take some years, I think. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Well, we don't need.
So
no one needs it to survive today in this country.
I mean, I love a scallop too. We have been diving for scallops.
That's probably one of my, apart from power, probably my favourite seafood for sure.
And one thing that must stop, and I put a word in here for people who would support that notion. What must stop is bottom impact fishing methods such as dredging for scallops and bottom trawling. Absolutely. These methods must end, and I think there's a large majority of the population in favour of that. These methods are arbitrarily destructive to the seafloor, and the seafloor holds the basis of the food chain for this ocean ecosystem down there in many places anyway. And scraping it for scallops is just not going to work.
Commercial and recreational way.
Yeah, totally. People should learn how to dive or get into diving for them. Fair enough, it's harder to do, and you get a few, that's all right, And so maybe the commercials will have to go to hiring divers to do this.
But they have to do with power or
use for scallops. They may be able to engineer an underwater robot that goes pick this, but not that one, kind of thing. Maybe, Yeah.
Do you really need it though?
No.
Like I've got the same point of view with the crayfish, and I'm just like, we can go without them for a while.
Totally.
I mean, I don't know the last time any of you guys bought a cray from a supermarket anyway, or a restaurant or whatever. But it's like, I don't even know why they commercially do it. Probably all going overseas is my guess.
Yeah, they're going live overseas to China, and of course that was cut back quite a bit because of China wasn't able to take those due to COVID and restrictions and all those things, and freight rates have gone through the roof. So there was quite some interesting issues for the businesses to actually sell those live lobsters to China.
Yeah, those fishermen just have to. That's one thing that actually annoys me is when they go, "Oh, what about the industry and all the people?" And I'm just like, "Well, when I lose my job, I just go get another job somewhere else." That's what you got to do. Tough shit. In my opinion.
The people who worked for Kodak Film Company making films, they suddenly found themselves unemployed because Kodak didn't realize what's going to happen to the industry. Right? They were like, "Oh, yeah, well." Things closed down, or the horsemen, they were driving the horses before the petrol engines came into business. Things change, stuff happens. I would say the S word, but it happens. You have to change what you do. Sometimes good old times end. So plundering the oceans for whatever is not going to go on forever.
Yeah, I'm totally against it.
And then we have the problem on land as well with agriculture, because I think both are quite close to each other, and we have both in New Zealand. Would you say are they quite strong, big problems in the country?
Well, back to global warming. New Zealand's largest single sector emitter of greenhouse gases is the agricultural industry. It's the dairy and beef and ruminant farming industry, particularly dairy. They're producing about 12,000 farmers, and about 3% of our employed population produce 48% of our greenhouse gases. So we all have to somehow do whatever we can do to minimize our emissions, while this particular industry, a very small sector of people, a large sector economically, they say, but we get to that. But a small sector of people, of employment actually, produces 48% of all our emissions. And the methane is a very interesting gas. Methane globally at the moment produces about 1/3 of the global warming pressure, basically, that's warming up the planet. About 1/3. Now, methane is interesting. Methane is a quickly decaying gas. So if we were to stop emitting methane, the cloud of methane that's in the atmosphere right now would, over the course of 1 or 2 decades, decay to carbon dioxide. one single methane molecule has a global warming potential of about 80 times when it's up there as one carbon dioxide molecule. So if it decays to carbon dioxide, it decays to very little considering the global warming effect that it now has. And so the amount of methane constantly up there is dependent on the flow rate of methane into the atmosphere. So our farmers basically by doing what they're doing, they keep a New Zealand-based cloud of methane airborne that as such has a global warming potential of 45 years of all the other carbon emissions at 2018 levels that we produce in New Zealand. That's amazing. So we can turn, if we, for some miraculously reason, we would get rid of all our ruminants tomorrow, right? We turn that tap off, then 10 years from now, 15 years from now, that cloud's gone. And we actually have done something to cool the planet. We have not just done something to make the global warming a little bit less fast or a little bit less. We actually took global warming pressure out of the ocean, out of the atmosphere, right? We could do that, and of course you need to talk to a few people who think that growing our herds is even something they want to do. I've been several times. I went to the interesting conference in Auckland, the EDS conference on climate and business. I went there several years in a row and listened to speakers and high-level speakers there, and they also invite the agricultural speakers there. There were speakers from the farming industry there, from the dairy industry, and their plans are to bigger what we're doing now. The more cows we need, the world needs more milk. We're doing a fantastic job making milk here, make more milk, but we can't even feed our current herd with the grass we can grow here. We are importing every year 2 million tons of palm kernel extract from the tropics, where there once were orangutans and rainforests within our palm kernel plantations.
And there goes the Amazon.
There goes the Amazon.
No,
yeah,
Amazon.
that too, yeah.
Fuck Brazil. Who gives a fuck about you?
Who gives a fuck about you? Exactly, yeah. And
Thank you.
Indonesia, the orangutans.
You're welcome.
So our farmers, New Zealand is the largest importer of palm kernel extract for animal feed by a long shot. 2 million tons is a big number. 2 million tons means every week a 40,000 ton freighter, a 40,000 ton bulk freighter on average, every week berths somewhere, unloads the stuff, and that's what our cows eat. So when you drink your milk in the morning, a lot of that milk is produced by the cows eating palm kernel extract, not the grass, because we have so incredibly overstocked of our herds in New Zealand that we cannot possibly feed them with the grass we can grow here, despite the fact we're chucking all the fertilizer on it, which is another story.
Oh, please, let's talk about the fertilizers.
Yeah. Fertilizers. Anyway. So
just always say, vegan talk. Now let's talk about fertilizers.
Yeah. Which is interesting. So
I'm ready.
So we have, and of course, on top of all this, you have to also then mention, of course, that all the river pollution we have, virtually all the river pollution we have is a runoff in one way or the other due to the farming industry. It's either the fertilizer runoff or it's a cow shit runoff or both of it. And we have a massive river pollution problem. Many rivers are not swimmable because of all these issues that we have, and freshwater use. Like in the Canterbury Plains, many of the braided rivers no longer reach the shore. Basically, in summer, there's a trickle coming through because all the water is pumped up higher up and on the fields, on areas that never should be farmed. And what now happens there, particularly also, there's really a critical thing. People should know that in New Zealand. Probably many people know this by now. That is. Our drinking water, not probably here in our town, but in many farming areas, the drinking water is now contaminated with nitrates. Nitrates from the fertilizer, nitrates from the cow piss, basically, right? And the aquifers in the Christchurch area are very bad with that stuff. Dr. Mark Joy has documented that quite a bit. And there's a very strong correlation between the level of nitrates in people's drinking water and the bowel cancer rate.
Yeah, bowel cancer.
Very strong correlation. And in New Zealand, we have the highest global bowel cancer rate.
Wow.
Right. So,
Did you know that?
No, we have. Wow. Yeah, it's incredible. So there is
I didn't know the highest part, but I knew that the nitrates and the bowel cancer. I learned that a couple of months ago.
There's possibly a strong correlation there between the pollution of our waters in our clean green country due to the dairy industry and the farming industry, and the bowel cancer rate. And possibly other cancers from the nitrates. Nitrates can be quite bad if they are too high in the water.
There's a lot of farmers who get cancer,
Oh, yeah.
Like with all the pesticides and things like that as well. Like they get like leukemia. I think it's a man-made cancer, and that's quite a common thing. But knowing someone who died from that, and they reckon it was probably Roundup and shit like that, just been sprayed. Especially back in the day, no masks and stuff like that.
Another interesting thing is that the fertilization that we do here with phosphate fertilizer, in the Waikato alone, we are sprinkling on average every year about 8 tons of cadmium onto our farms as well. That comes as a byproduct of the phosphate. It's a trace mineral in the phosphate fertilizer we're spraying out. And 8 tons of cadmium. Cadmium is a heavy metal that is not water soluble. It stays in the ground where it is, and it's very toxic. And the levels of cadmium in the soil are now increasing because of this practice all the time. And there's a report you can download from the Waikato Regional Council that detailed all this pretty clearly. In the report, it says that when we carry on like doing this, then the land will become unsuitable for farming because there are certain margins and limits. You cannot farm on land if the cadmium content in the soil is above a certain level. We're sort of going towards that, and you can
They'll
also
just keep raising that level.
They're probably raising the bar when they get to that maybe. And you also cannot subdivide it because you can't have the kids playing in that soil, right? And so who's going to dig that stuff away, and where's it going to go? It's.
And then we produce food that is not as nutritious as it used to be. So consequently, people get dumber.
God buys
in a way. Well, if you think about it, like of not getting the proper nutrition or having to supplements every time, like we're growing weaker and getting weaker than
that's actually one of the interesting things is back to climate change and carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. Some of the global warming consequence deniers say, it's all going to be good because more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere means the plants will grow more vigorously. We're going to have much more of plant production, Right. There is this idea of the Liebig's barrel. There's this guy, ecologist Liebig, and he had this analogy of a barrel, an old barrel, where the wooden boards that make up the barrel, they're of different length, right? And you can fill the barrel up with water until the lowest rung of those boards is letting the water run out, right? So no matter how high the others are, the lowest determines how high the water level will get, right? So for plant growing, raising the carbon dioxide level is not necessarily going to do anything for you if some of the other things don't work out, right? And we have enough carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to make plants grow really well. But the things that are hampering it are, as we know here, are the fertilizer, it's the nitrates, it's the phosphate, it's the water we chuck on it, all those things. These are the main things that change our plant growth, not the carbon dioxide, right? Yes, if we do all the other things also, like if in a controlled environment like greenhouses in Holland, whatever, they have greenhouses there where they control all these other factors really well and they raise all these nutrients, and then they raise the carbon dioxide also, and sure enough, they get much bigger plants. However, they get bigger, more massy, but the nutrition ratio per kilogram goes down. So now you eat your kilogram of broccoli, but you only have maybe half the other nutrients in there because it's been diluted by the mass of it. So people who say to you that, it's going to be all good, we're going to grow much bigger plants, they simply don't understand the ecology of plant growing, and they don't understand anything about nutrition either. That's just sad.
Well, I suppose it's, I've thought about this before, like when I was raised pretty religious, and it was always treat your body like a temple, that sort of stuff, And but I sort of thought about it, and I was like, the only way we get stuff into our body right is like we breathe it in, we put it on our skin, we eat it.
Sure.
There's a few limited ways, and it's the same with a plant. Like it's got to get that nutrition from somewhere. It doesn't get, a plant doesn't just go, I'm going to make all this stuff now, and it's just using the carbon dioxide as fuel to make all the stuff. It's pulling it out of the soil, right? And it made me think when you're saying that before, that we're doing this, we need to like view the earth as the same, because we're pumping all the stuff into it as if it's like our skin, and it's getting absorbed into it. When I did my painting apprenticeship, they were talking about lead-based paints. We used to use a whole lot of lead-based paints, and like that was all on like the exteriors of all the houses. And then over time, as we have washed out our gear into the lawns, like this is in the past, and when we've sanded or
just chucked it in the grass,
sanded off, and the dust has gone into the grass. They did, when we're doing the course, they said they went around and tested whoever it was, it's probably local councils, tested people's backyards, and almost all of them had lead contamination, which is like you say, those heavy metals are they're the worst,
the worst for child development in particular.
And I was just like, wow, and they were like pretty much all of them. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I can't remember the percentage, but it was just like, well, that's all of them. You know what I mean? It was really, really, really.
I
high.
still remember when I grew up in Germany, it was lead in the petrol. That was what you had, because otherwise the engines would knock on something. So lead was in the petrol. And then this legislation came in to ban the lead in the petrol. And of course, the car manufacturers were like, no, we can't do this. The car industry will come to an end. Of course, it didn't come to an end, And then there was the catalytic converter issue. Oh, the car industry will come to an end if you legislate those. Well, that didn't happen. Yeah.
I watched a documentary on that just recently about short documentary YouTube episode.
It counts.
But about the lead, and it was like the guy who invented leaded fuel has killed like more people than any like dictator has.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah,
possibly.
And I was like, I don't know the truth or the accuracy of that, but it was there's a lot of death revolved around it in manufacturing.
It's
as well.
cool how we're talking about these things, because it's a very common thing to hear nowadays. Like, but even if you look back in history, like we are definitely living at the best time, because we're living longer.
Sure.
And like in medicine is so advanced, like we hear that all the time, but then it makes you think, right? You say, well, maybe we were not living as many years as we are now, but like, what about the quality of life that we were having?
I disagree with that.
Oh, I'm not saying that it is.
They had some pretty poor quality of life back in the day, man.
Well, but it's still, go to some countries in Africa or South America nowadays, and you tell me if they have like quality of life. Like it's easy to say when you are in a developed country, and then you say, oh yeah, life is fantastic right now. It has never been as great as it used to be. Like, and I'm not sure.
Poverty, to be fair, when you compare the amount of people who lived in poverty, say 200 years ago, to the amount of people who live in poverty now, it's a fraction of the amount of people
that live in poverty now.
They live in poverty now compared to back in the day.
Well, it's so how do you define poverty?
From what I've
that's what I'm thinking. How do you define poverty? Like what do you mean? Like being wealthy and carrying
the amount of money you can live off.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't want to quote Jordan Peterson because I know you dislike him.
No, nothing wrong.
Cool. Well, then he says that if you go back, I think it's 150 years, they're living off the equivalent of $1 per day by today's standards.
Yeah.
That's the average person.
Yeah.
Now, would obviously live off more than $1 a day, apart from maybe some people in Africa.
Well, that's
and other third world countries.
Well, any measure is always relative. There is no such thing as absolute measures. So if you say poverty, you have to compare to what, So if you go back 150 years, people had shorter lifespans. The disease was not curable in many ways. The lifespans were maybe 50 years, 60 years on average, or something else. Could be. And so life was, from our measure, a lot poorer. But if you'd ask those people, talk about each other, are you poor? Are you poor? Oh no, we're fine. We're having. I have an iron kettle, and I can and so everything is relative, right?
I think they're probably mentally more healthy.
Possibly, yeah. While they were not ill, their bodies may have been healthier because they were working out a lot more in nature out there, and they were more nature connected.
They survived childhood.
But measles, back to that, So,
And then we're depressed nowadays. You live longer, but you're depressed. So that's what I mean. Like I was not saying that is wrong, that statement. What I meant was like it makes you think. Yeah. Because you live 100 years, but you live depressed, eating food that is not the best one. You fear the sun. You live by a light that is, made by your cell phone. That's what I meant. I didn't say it is true, but like there's.
I want to maybe say one more thing to that also with the quality of life. The freedoms that come with it, the maximum freedom we feel we have right now. Back to Simone Weil's argument, with that scales up the also the maximum responsibility, right? So we have all these freedoms now, and thank you for the line. All these freedoms now, and with that scales up also the amount of responsibility rests on our shoulders, because we can do so much in a negative way, but also positive way, but the responsibility to use these resources we have, this wealth we have. scales up with the wealth we have, you know, and many people don't realize that, or they don't want to hear about it, you know.
We have
responsibility, what, you know?
We do have these. We do have these freedoms, but they're also within these walls as well.
And the more freedom you have, the more responsibility you have to use it wisely. You know?
We're going hard on the deep subjects, which I love. But let's just break the ice a little bit. Get some questions from the audience, and I also want to hear the beautiful story about how you came to New Zealand.
Yes.
But before we go there, just to get our audience in the game. So, Thomas, when was the last probably the last time you changed your mind or was convinced by evidence against some instinctive bias you held? Do you think that changing your mind and accepting the change is a learned skill?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. As a scientist, you learn this all the time. You know, you experiment and it goes wrong, and you have an hypothesis and it fails, and you try again. You know, that's how science works. You know, you change your mind all the time, and you read new scientific publications about a topic, and you go like, oh, that's something new. Oh, that's different. That's I hadn't thought. That's how science works. Absolutely.
And do you remember? Do you remember the last big one? The last one that you were like, "Whoa, look at this! I was wrong."
Yeah, sure. I mean, during my PhD work, for example, I'm reading lots of new stuff that I haven't been subjected before with, you know, and there are new ideas coming my way that I never had before, that I never ventured before. Oh, well, this is interesting. This is something new. Oh, that changes my perspective entirely on something. You know, that is totally part of the process. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. And just one more before you tell us your journey to New Zealand, Fabian. What was the best meal you ever had?
The best meal I ever.
Meal,
like eating. Well,
meal. Who,
gosh.
What, when, etc.
Oh my God! Well, that's
great. I want to know this as well.
I would like to know that too. I've eaten lots of good food in my life, I think, in the past, and it's very hard to pick one best meal over another.
But maybe like, or even like a country or a trip.
Yeah, was it maybe one? So when I had the software company in Germany, we had this group of distributors, and one distributor was in England, you know, and so we were invited. We had this little conferences them around different countries to talk about our stuff. So there was this. Our British distributor invited everybody else from the rest of the countries to London to this meeting. They went there, and he invited us to the Blue something rather restaurant upstairs, some sort of London thing. And now London, in my mind, originally wasn't here. I changed my mind, right? London wasn't renowned. England wasn't renowned as to be like a fine cuisine. You thought about France, you know. But we got there, and my God, this was an absolutely amazing meal. I remember the wine selection as well, quite good. And it also happened to be my birthday actually on that day. It's like I had a few more wines than I normally might have, but it was a phenomenal meal. You know, it was just one of those celebratory things you do once in your life. You go like, oh, I'm probably never going to have that again.
And
you know,
probably also because you didn't have high expectations. Because I was listening to this study.
Oh no, well
were you hoping to be amazing, or you were kind of like,
well, we thought,
see.
oh my God, they take us to the famous restaurant somehow. They were sort of said before that we're going to go to some really nice place. I think there were some expectations were raised, but they were topped, you know, by what then happened, you know. So
I think was on RNZ that I was listening to this lady talking about this study, and she said that every time you find something amazing, especially when it comes to food, and you want to tell someone, you should not tell them how amazing it is, because you just ruined that person's experiences. You know, like you just. They were being very specific about how the brain works with that, but just because you said it's amazing, like the person instantly comes up with that expectation, and it might not be that amazing, you know. So I was just wondering if you.
Anyway, it was just one of these things that actually did stick in my mind from many years in the back. That was an amazing meal, yeah.
Nice. And now I think now is a good time. Tell us a little bit about your journey to New Zealand. So, where were you before?
Right. Yeah. Well, I was in America. So I moved to America literally on the 1st of January 1990. I was in the plane to America to market our software there in the US. After 1 year, I stopped there and sold the company, stayed in America. And towards in 94, beginning of 94, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, and he took several years out of his career as an engineer in Germany. He jumped on a push bike and he flew to Montreal from Germany on his push bike, unpacked the push bike and biked from Montreal to the west coast of Canada, all the way through there, then biked down the coast of California, where we met. Actually, I was in California at the time. We met there for a while. And then he carried on, and he push-biked all the way down to Chile and Farland, across Central America, dangerous territory. Some sort of not so good experience I think he had, but nothing was stolen from him ever there, I think, much. And then biked back up Chile a little bit, then hitchhiked on a boat, I think, to the Pacific Islands. So he went to the French Polynesia. I think he even went to... no, he didn't go to Easter Island, but or maybe he did. I don't know. Yeah. He went to French Polynesia, Rarotonga, Fiji, and then took a yacht to New Zealand. And he was biking in New Zealand. He called me up in America and said, "Look, this is really nice. I'd like to invite you to come over bike with me here." So I said, "Oh, great." So I took my bicycle and flew to Wellington and met him there. And we took the ferry over, and then we biked to South Island, to Queenstown for about 3 weeks or something it was. And very fantastic experience, very, very good. And in Queenstown, I had to fly back to the US. So I took a rental car in Queenstown and drove all the way back to Auckland to catch my plane. And he carried on. We said goodbye there. He carried on, by the way, then later on through Asia, made his way to China, Russia, Poland, back to Germany.
He skipped Australia? Didn't want to bike through the middle of Australia?
Hit me on the face. I'm not sure if he visited Australia. He could have visited. Maybe he did. Look, the story. His story is not any. But the interesting thing is, he was a day ride out of Germany in Poland and had his entire kit stolen in front of a cafe by somebody with a truck parked up and chucked bicycles in the truck, and anyway, he was on Polish TV for that and all those things. I mean, he got a new Polish bike, and he was biking towards home, and he got 50 kilometers out of Poland and the bearings.
Not known for bike makers.
I'm not making a point here against Polish bicycles. He had a bad experience with a Polish gifted bike. Anyway, but back to my own story. So I drove. It's a funny story. He can tell it better than I can, but it's true. It's true. True story, factual story. Anyway, so I drove back and I spent a night in a backpackers in Taupo. And in that backpacker in Taupo, there were two couples from America who were sailing around the world on sailboats. And they had parked their sailboat in the summer, as you do if you do that, in the Bay of Islands. And they experienced New Zealand, and they were in Taupo. And we got a chatting over the evening, and they told me about their experience, and having just spent this time with my friend who has taken 4 years out of his career to do this biking around the world and then meeting these guys, and I listened to the stories, and I'm like, oh, actually, why on earth wouldn't I do this? Maybe perhaps too, buy a boat. So on the way back to America, landing in San Francisco, I went to check out some marinas, and I bought a boat. On the spur of the moment, a 38-foot, an old 38-foot Hans Christian, if people know what that is, cutter, 38-foot cutter, bought it in Sausalito in San Francisco, and then spent another 4 or 5 months to outfit the boat and get it ready for sailing, and then sail off in February '95, sail off from America.
Were you a sailor before that?
No, interesting story, but Christ. I was a pilot and a flyer. So I was a flyer, a flight instructor, a gliding instructor. I was flying in America. I had an IFR ticket, flying the clouds, sort of stuff. So I knew the weather, I knew the radio stuff, I knew the navigation, and all this stuff quite well. Knew the weather really well. I'm a fan of weather or stuff and so forth, but I didn't really know yet was how to cope with the
weather. I like that.
Fan of weather. I like weather phenomena. It's the climate, isn't it? Anyway, and so I left. I wasn't sure how I was prepared for the ocean conditions, but sailing is like flying a wing. It's only an upright wing. It's very very similar aerodynamics. That was not the problem. But as a kid, I had read a book by Thor Heyerdahl called Kon-Tiki. It's a book about a Norwegian adventurer researcher.
There's a movie as well.
Yes,
fantastic movie. Yeah.
And he built this balsa float in South America to prove the idea that the Pacific Island nations were settled somehow. Was his idea. It's probably not true, but anyway, or partially not true, but were settled by people who were sailing with balsa floats from South America to the Pacific Islands.
I've seen a documentary.
And as a kid, I read this book and I was fascinated by this story. So somehow getting the Pacific and reliving this was in my future somehow, I guess, when I read as a kid this book, I'm like, oh my God, So there I was, and the first time I dropped an anchor of any boat of any description was my boat when I reached the Marquesas, and it wasn't you chuck the anchor aboard, that works. That was kind of cool. That was kind of crazy. But anyway, so it took 6 weeks, the first trip was 6 weeks from leaving shore in San Diego. Actually, it was in San Diego when New Zealand won the America's Cup. That was that year. was kind of cool. I was there, where, you know.
Were you on your boat, like in the water?
No, I was in the marina there when the races happened, but I wasn't a spectator, but and so then I left, and then I finally reached Tahiti, and I was in Tahiti on the French election night of the fateful election of 1995. And I was in a pub, they wanting a beer. I couldn't get a beer because you can't drink alcohol on French election day in a pub. You know.
Oh, France.
No, you can't. Yeah, not after. Yeah. Anyway, so I couldn't get a beer.
Only while you're pregnant.
Yeah. No, yeah. And it's election day. Anyway. So, and of course on the TV in the bar there was Jacques Chirac already declaring victory because of the time difference with France. It didn't matter what the people in France Outre-mer, in Tahiti were voting for. It didn't matter at all. So, so he declared victory. And in my broken French, one of the first things he said was he's going to resume atomic testing at Mururoa. We're back to the territory of what Anna talked to you about. And so I'm a physicist, all that crap. And behind me, the pub erupted, and they were debating whether or not throwing bottles at the TV would be of any good effect. But no, this is the publicans' TV. We want to, you know. So there was some anger there in the pub about that, obviously. And so I went like, oh, that's already shit. You know, we shouldn't be doing atomic tests in this beautiful environment that I was now sailing in and seeing and being enthralled by the beauty of this area. It's completely total mismatch of categories, right? Shouldn't be happening. So I didn't then immediately get involved with this whole anti-atomic protest because I had a friend awaiting me in Rarotonga, a good old friend of mine, a pilot. Picked him on Rarotonga and sailed with him to Tonga, and then made my way to Fiji. And in Fiji I bumped into the Rainbow Warrior from Greenpeace, who had already been at Mururoa at the stage. They had been rammed, they had been boarded, they'd been battered, whatever, and had left Mururoa again. The French didn't arrest the ship at that stage, and they went back to Fiji for a refit. So I was there, met them, and they said, look, you know, we're going back out there. And by now there was this whole flotilla building of boats that wanted to protest at Mururoa. So I said, I'll come. And then flew in a girl from New Zealand, Rachel Sanson. She flew in. She's now a counsellor in Nelson, actually. And she flew in to be crew on my boat because the Greenpeace vessel was full. She wanted to be on a Greenpeace vessel. They had no more berth. And I got an American crew member from Ted, a good friend of mine by now, as well, from Hawaii. He was an environmentalist, and he jumped ship from an American ship where he was crew onto my boat, and we went off towards Mururoa. And made our way against the trade winds towards Mururoa, which is not what you should be doing. You should be going south first and then around, but we sort of went like, go straight kind of thing. And it was an interesting journey. I could talk for ages about all the experiences there, but to make it a bit shorter, so the journey went again towards Nui, first of all, and then Rarotonga. And in Rarotonga, there was sort of a staging ground for the protest fleet. And one interesting thing, a big Fijian inter-island ferry sailed into the small Rarotonga port, and it was chartered by a bunch of politicians, among them the deputy German opposition leader, Heidi something rather, Hiroshima survivors from Japan, parliamentarians from there, journalists from all the place, the journalists from Der Spiegel, which in Germany is like Time magazine kind of thing, and lots of people. And they had chartered this ship in the expectation that would bring them to Mururoa to protest there. They wanted to protest there too, right? And so this ship, you know, Fijian inter-island ferries are things you try to avoid, and they're very rusty, and they may not, the trip may be uncomfortable and you may not arrive. Perhaps, I'm painting a bad picture there. But anyway, that thing looked like this. And they had nailed bunk beds to the cargo hold for all these people because there was no cabins really on those things, right? So anyway, and in Rarotonga were also French spies going around. There was one particular one, a German individual who was with the French Secret Service or something like this, and he wanted to come on my boat. And to Mururoa, I said, no. He looked military, short haircut, this and that. He had a number tattooed in here somewhere. And he said, I'm on a holiday, but I got a survival suit, and I got a radio, and I got all these things. I'm very capable. I said, well, no. and so he somehow talked himself onto this Fijian inter-island ferry, the County Tony. And also boarding this ship was actually the premier of Rarotonga, Papa Doc something, not Papa Doc, but anyway, name of base right now. So this ship left port first, a couple of days earlier than we left, and exactly 1,000 miles. It's a 2,000-mile sail between Rarotonga and Mururoa, so 1,000 miles from there, exactly in the middle. Mayday, mayday, the ferry calls up, the engine says we're marooned in the water, we're drifting. And so I called them back and said, look, this German, you got him aboard, right? Was he in the engine room before it failed? Oh, yeah, you wanted to see the engine room. And I said, well, lock him into a small cabin. I can tell you all about him, you know. Because I have a brother in Hamburg. The guy told me, I'm from Hamburg. I'm working with this ad agency, so-and-so. So I called my brother in Hamburg up, said, hey, does this exist? Nah, that agency doesn't exist. So there was, you know, all this backdrop. He was a badly disguised French Secret Service man. Anyway, badly disguised, yeah. And so they locked him away. He also wanted to then call up on the radio the French Navy to rescue this protest ship and bring them to Tahiti and give them wine and bread and kind of thing. What you do to tinge over what you otherwise do. So we sailed past it. We got the Spiegel reporter of this Fijian inter-island ferry. It was called the County Tony. That's what we got the Spiegel reporter off, and then made our way to Moroa to protest there and reached Moroa eventually. And a wonderful, beautiful morning, and lots of sailboats there assembled. And one of them was the Artaka Thompson from the Bay of Islands, nice square rigger, which was here for the 2-year commemorations. And
I saw that.
Yeah. And I met my partner there because she was a crew member on the Taka Thompson. So I would not be talking to you today if the French had elected the other schmuck on the in June 1995. My life would have panned out quite differently. Yes,
Wow.
Yeah.
Which so you said that you can fly planes and you're very good with your boats. Which one gave you the worst experience in your life? That you were very scared of something that happened. You were like, "Ooh, I'm not sure about the situation here now."
There was an incident flying. I was flying in the clouds and on the joke in the airplane, there was an autopilot in the airplane, and the control joke had a little tiny dinky button. It was like a thing you buy at Dick Smith. It should have been better, but I mean, if you pushed the button, the autopilot went off, right? And so I had my chart. God. I read the chart, and my paper of the chart must have touched the autopilot off button. But I'm in the clouds. I'm relying the autopilot keeps the plane steady, and I start feeling kind of weird, you know. Look at how far out and so I caught it back, you know, but it was one of those moments when, like, if this would have gone on for much longer in the clouds, it can go quite quickly, quite bad, you know. And the other thing is that autopilot didn't have an audible, normally you push it off, it goes beep, beep off or something. And this autopilot didn't have an audible disconnect alert, which I complained to the FAA in America about. You know, that shouldn't happen, you know. You should be alerted to the fact that it just went off. Anyway, one of those little things. And sailing-wise, luckily, knock on wood, I never had... Can't recall having really a superbly dangerous situation. I had uncomfortable times, lots of uncomfortable times. Sailing to Moroa was very uncomfortable. We were sailing into the wind, and I discovered a few features about the boat at that time that I didn't know before, namely that the boat that I had bought was hull number 7. That was built by the factory who made these Hans Christian boats. It was a fiberglass hull, fiberglass core deck with some wood inside and sort of big bulwarks on the side. And when they molded the hulls together, they hadn't quite mastered the skill of matching it up quite well, and they tinged it over basically with some nice teak wall straps on the side. But what I didn't realize was that there were gaps in there that could let water in the hull. And when you're sailing hard too and you're burying the rail all the time, water would come in there. So I was looking at my galley down there, and there's water running into my food stores. Oh, where's the water coming from? It's come from somewhere out of the deck, but where it entered the deck was unclear at all. So you just have another 1,000 miles to sail like this. And you go, so we're bucketing out the bottom of the galley into the bilge, where the bilge pump will take care of it, and go to the other tack to get the water. Yeah, so it was a bit of a wet trip to go to Moroa, but
another 1,000 miles to go.
Yeah. You always hope the weather will sweeten up a little bit, which it did eventually. So, you know, yeah.
Thomas, I want to ask you a question that I'm thinking here. I think I don't remember us ever talking about this, so I'm like, this might be an interesting one. As someone who understands so much facts, how nature works, you know, physics and frequencies, and where does spirituality sit for a person who knows? Because, you know, like some people are not aware of things,
sure,
and they like to say, "Oh, it's divine," no. And then someone with the knowledge comes and say, "Nah, it's actually this," and then you're like, "Ooh, I just learned something." But you covered a lot, and still we know that we don't know much.
There's so much we don't know. That is the interesting part of it, yeah.
How does that sit with you?
Well, maybe I think it was my connections probably started a little bit also with my childhood. I had a lot of thoughts, and my mum was part of that, probably in sort of discussing with me matters of science a little bit when I was little, And one of the things that I had was, oh, Mum, does the universe have an end when you go further, And she, I don't know. And I said, well, but if it had an end, you could build a wall there, but then you could climb on the other side of the wall, and then it would not be the end, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so these sort of thoughts, as maybe a 6-year-old, I had, and it connected me with this awe about what is reality really all about. What is it really? And it's a link to spirituality somehow to understand what is this universe. I tell my year 13 students when they leave in my last classes, sometimes in physics, I told them, look, you guys are the eyes and the ears of the universe. Through you, the universe looks back at itself and goes like, what the fuck's going on? The universe has become conscious in you. There may be other conscious entities in the universe as well. There may be many other planets with possibly maybe intelligent life as well, but we sure know that we are. And so one of the obligations that I impinge on my students is like, one of the obligations is to do good to the universe as being its eyes and ears. Who else does the universe have to look back at itself with? So you are part of this fantastic universe. You're an end point of a long history of becoming to this point, and there will be people behind you that follow you, but for every moment that you're awake, you are the universe's eyes and ears and the universe's brain, and you can start through you, the universe becoming conscious. You're a part of this consciousness, right? That is emanating, that's becoming, and wow, how can this Big Bang, this particle and stuff, end up to something, to the universe being conscious of itself? We shouldn't think of ourselves, I think, as entities as such, but as part of the universal way of being conscious of things, and I remember many of the nights sailing, you sail at night. I always took the night watch, the early night watch with the crew. I like the nights, and you watch your mast sort of tracing out a number 8 as it sways over the stars out there, and you're 1,000 miles from anything in this little boat, and it's a huge spiritual experience, really. I felt that's very close to like taking a space trip, really. You're as far removed from anybody else. Nobody can help you if something goes wrong. You're on your own, and there's the stars and you in the water, and a dolphin jumping maybe next to you or a whale behind you. We had some amazing sea life, and these were very spiritual years. I also spent, while I was in America, I spent some time, occasionally some weeks, at a place called Esalen Institute. That's in California. It's sort of a human potential institute. And met some awesome people there. They were lecturing there or were there as guests as well. And engaged with quite a number of sort of spiritual aspects there. I met Fritjof Capra there, spent a bit of time with him also. Fritjof Capra is a German physicist who wrote some spiritually leaning books about physics and quantum physics, and met a Chinese guy there called Chungliang Alhuang. He wrote a book with Fritjof Capra, and met a bunch of people. Another person I met is a monk, actually, Mr. Steindl Rust from Austria, and a totally spiritual person. Fantastic experience to be there and listen to his lectures and so forth. Yeah. So, and music for me, art for me, music in particular is for me a pathway to spirituality. I love music, as you know, and play a little bit of guitar, but nothing to the scale that I could present to anybody. But music to me is music to me is a mystical phenomenon. How come we are so taken by this music thing? How come it moves us so much? If we listen to classical music sometimes, or to modern music, listening to a Sting or something, or artists who really push the buttons in some way or the other on the emotional scale as well as the spiritual scale. It's quite special, and the gap between the notes, the pregnant gap between the notes, to me, that's where it's.
I think it's Miles Davis who says that it's about the silence, actually, right?
It is about the silence.
It's when you don't play.
Exactly. To me, the pregnant pause is the specialty of it. You can hammer it, but you can, what comes next, and the potentiality. What could be the next move? This resolution, and it's very interesting, to me to be taken by the music somewhere. Music takes you somewhere, to me, and that's part of the spiritual pathway, I think.
I like that. Let's go back to our audience. Okay, sure. So hi Thomas from Hanako. Do you believe in UFOs and the possibility of alien life existing?
Yeah, very good question. A very important question. We have so many other stars in the universe, and we now know that most stars have planets around them. We can say that it's an irregularity to have a star with no planets. It's probably the minority. So we have planets a lot, billions in our own galaxy alone, and then there are billions of galaxies. So the chance that there are planets that can bear life is very high. The chance that there are planets that are within a orbit around their star that allows water to be liquid on that planet, there are those planets, I'm sure there are. How likely will it be that there is other life? Well, just the other day there was a report that made this a little bit more probable. There was an interesting paper come out that showcased how short strings of RNA can synthesize themselves in a reaction that actually school kids can do at school, I think, by bubbling amino acids through particularly prepared little pebbles of basalt rock. It was something new. It wasn't known before. The basalt rock somehow must have a catalytic sort of function that allows the amino acids to pop together into short strings of RNA, which is the building block of self-replicating molecules. And all you need to do for life to start really is a self-replicating molecule that can replicate. You need some environmental pressure on this molecule, and you need a pathway for this molecule to change itself, to mutate, and to explore pathways of better fitness. And if you got this, the process of evolution will start, right? You have seeded an evolutionary process that brought us to this place today. So yes, it would have happened on many other planets as well. I'm sort of confident that we find some traces of that on Mars, that there is past life on Mars. I'm quite confident that is the case.
Cool.
Some people even believe there might be some traces of life-like molecules in the high atmosphere on Venus, not at the bottom, but on the high atmosphere. There are areas that are temperature-wise suitable perhaps for that. And I think our own space company here from New Zealand will explore that. They want to send a probe to Venus actually to explore the atmosphere there. It's kind of, look for that space. Kind of interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it a promising?
Rocket Lab. Yeah, Rocket Lab wants to. They have one of their goals was to self-fund a mission to Venus with a probe that will probe for things in the Venus atmosphere. I'm not sure how far they will get with that and what they're actually going to bring back from knowledge from there. They won't bring the probe back, but. Bring some knowledge back. But anyhow, so yes, so the answer to the question, first question is yes, there will be life on the universe for sure. I don't think we are an exception. Every time in human thought we are an exception. Any time in human thought the Earth is the center of the universe, it wasn't the case. The Sun is the center of the universe, it wasn't the case. You know, the Copernican principle that we are just an ordinary thing in an otherwise quite similar universe will apply for us as well. However, it took 4 billion years since the Earth formed, roughly, or thereabouts, for intelligent life to finally come about that had language, that had made use of tools, and then exploded in this civilization that now is talking back to the universe and exploring it. It took a long time for this to happen, so that means that wasn't very likely. You know, if it was very likely, human-like or intelligent life forms would have happened earlier on the planet, maybe 1 billion years earlier or something. Who knows? I think the climate wasn't probably right for this at this time. You know, it was right for dinosaurs, not right for us. But anyhow, so it took a long time. So
that's why they went under the Earth, you know, the reptilians.
Yeah, the first marsupials were the first. Anyhow. So there will be intelligent life somewhere in the universe. I think the likelihood is high. However, the distances even to the nearest star are so colossal that getting there with any technology that I can imagine, and I studied physics, that people can imagine, is taking too long to make it likely that any life form from another planet has consciously and deliberately and in a spacecraft of some description visited us. That is, I think, very unlikely. Because for us, I mean, it will take thousands of years and generations of people on such a spacecraft to reach a different planet that they might find. And that applies for people coming our way as well. And to construct anything that'll last that long, it's just, I just can't believe that'll happen. Yeah.
I don't want to go too deep, but I just have a comment of something that I read recently about, because we don't know what consciousness is.
Yeah.
You know, we study medicine and we go and we discover more and more and more about the body, and we have no clue about an idea, but where this thing with the consciousness is coming from or where it's going to. And then I read something about this guy was saying, well, the same way that we can go as deep as we can into the universe, probably we can go deep within and
Yeah.
connect things in a way that we don't even think about it yet. So
Yeah.
this power that lies within
Sure.
might be so powerful, and we might find answers who knows when.
Yeah, things to think about. I don't think that the powers within our brain will affect the material world around us. You know, that's the physics is not there to allow that. But sure, we can think fantastic thoughts that we haven't yet comprehended. Absolutely, and science is point in case. You know, we discover more and more fantastic things. And in mathematics, we discover them through a deliberate thought, through thinking about amazing things in an amazingly different way. It's the lateral thinking. They're thinking about a problem from a surprisingly different perspective. That is so important. And that's why I also think I want to put a plug in here for cultural diversity, and I want to plug in for Mātauranga Māori as part of the science curriculum, for example, a big article for that, because we need to learn to look at the world from different perspectives in order to actually comprehend the world. We need to look from various perspectives, and we need to we are blessed with the opportunities we have in New Zealand to have the ability to link with Tangata Whena, to link with Mātauranga Māori, to link with this philosophy in a strong way, in a powerful way, because we have a powerful partner, a treaty partner to work with and to learn with and to learn from. So we should, and it's a huge opportunity for us to open our eyes. One of the best things that my mum did for my upbringing was we spent all our holidays later on, when I grew up a bit older, to travel different parts of the world. So she traveled me to India, and we saw the Indian slums, we saw whatever. We went to Africa, we saw that, we saw multiple different parts of the world in very different cultures, and it opened my perspective up to, you can live like that. Well, that's fine. You know, it eases you. If they're fine in the slum, they're alive. You know, they're cooking a meal and they're happy. They're laughing at you. They're laughing with you. They're enjoyable to be there. This enormous relax comes. Well, you don't need all this stuff. You know, we that's okay. That's okay. And that's okay. You know. And I think that's an important perspective. So seeing things from different viewpoints is very important. And for a scientist too, to go like, well, I'm trying to try a very, very different way to look at it. That's where discoveries are made, you know.
Good connection with my next question. Sorry, just to get the segue there. Robo4 asks, did you change any of your or your family's habits as a result of anything you learned from your studies? He said this study, so probably we're talking about something before, but maybe something related to climate change?
Yeah, when in 2008 I built an electric car because I wanted to see how that works, and so I took an old together Starlet from Trade Me, gutted the engine out of there, gutted everything out of there. It was
Starlet.
Combustible to get a Starlet. Yes, a Starlet. It was 1991 Starlet.
91 Starlet.
The pre power steering, ABS braking, all that stuff. So I wanted a simple car, and I chucked everything out and put an electric motor in there, put batteries in there, and I've been driving this car since 2008 until 2020 when I sold it eventually to somebody who wanted to have it.
Elon Musk.
Now we got it. No, I do. Some collector who wanted it. My car was was maybe the oldest still running home built electric car in New Zealand at that time. That's what the dealer said, whom I sold it to, and we bought a Nissan Leaf.
You could be the richest person on the planet right now if you have.
If I had built
America.
No.
And you did it with a Lotus instead of a Starlet.
Lotus, yeah, whatever. Yeah, well, if I had a few million to start with and a sponsor, right? But anyhow, so we're trying to do this. We're trying otherwise to limit our use of resources if we can. We would like to move to probably a different place where we have a bit more land to do some more gardening. We'll move to a house that is more suitable for being completely solar. The house we're in right now. We moved here to get the kids through high school, and the house we bought at the time is really well located for all that. But the roof line is unfortunately one that runs from south to north, and so the roof faces are east and west, and it's not really ideal for solar panels. So instead of putting panels on our roof, I advocated for the school to get 100 kilowatt onto their roof. Since 2013, I've been advocating for that, and finally this year we got a 100 kilowatt system on our school. So
I'm very curious to see where technology is going to take us to not actually need the panel. You know, I'm looking forward to this moment where the solar energy will be captured in a simpler way.
Yeah.
And
Because
is that fission as well, right? Or is it fusion? You'll be a
Efficient, yeah.
Fission is
fusion.
right.
Fusion, yeah.
Is it fusion
That's different,
that's making? That's been in the news quite a bit lately. They're making pretty big leaps and bounds. That could be the way of the future if it's possible.
Maybe, yeah. Let's talk about solar panels first. So solar energy is a matter of how much area do you have to capture. So if you want a lot of power, you need a lot of area, because the sun reaches the ground at between 800 and, on a super day, maybe 1,000 watt per square meter, but generally maximum about 800 watt per square meter is coming in. And then the solar panel efficiency, the ones on the school roof, they're sort of in the low 20% efficiency. And that's sort of where the technology is at the moment, about the 20% range-ish, a bit more. And so that's what you can get, right? And so the more area, the better. If you're talking about other ways of doing it, you're normally talking about panels that are possibly a lot cheaper. Like there are some panels that can be painted on now. They're working on this in Australia as a company. Where you paint on solar panel type functionality onto a substrate, like a glass window or something, which is still transparent to some degree when you have the solar panel over it. But the efficiencies of these are fairly low, and they don't last. Unfortunately, these painted ones have a life expectancy of a year or two, so you need to then chuck it and get. So there are issues with those things.
What are the Germans or the Japanese coming up with? That's what I want to know.
Solar panel wise, well, at the moment, there are two developments. One is bring the costs down. Mm-hmm. Who cares about the size? If it's not as efficient but costs only a fraction of it, then I might just plaster more on my roof with them, because space hasn't been the issue really so much. The panels are efficient enough, and we have enough roof space on the school to double the capacity if you really wanted to again, and so space is not an issue. So cost down is one of those main things that has been driving the solar revolution really. Mm-hmm. And it's come out to the point where solar power is cheaper than coal power. If you want to build a coal-powered power plant and buy the coal for the lifetime of this plant, you're better off buying solar panels now. It's cheaper. Large grid-scale solar panel projects in India have outbid on cost proposals for more coal because it's just cheaper. But I mean, there will be more interesting solar solutions, such as maybe wearable stuff for your phone. So your phone doesn't need to be charged at night. But that's small power use. It's just small bits, gadgets of phones, stuff like that. Yeah.
Thomas, is it true that you also run one of the world's first green-powered Bitcoin mining operations?
No, I do not, and for a very good reason. There is no such thing than a green Bitcoin mining operation at all.
Thanks, Fib. There you go.
Yeah,
there's an answer for you.
So Bitcoin in my mind, and people will disagree in the audience perhaps, Bitcoin in my mind is a pyramid scheme, and it's a very, very, very dangerous one, essential for the planet, because Bitcoin at the moment consumes as much energy as a mid-sized European country.
Well, but then there's the thing with letting go of the bank.
Oh, we
system.
don't do that. Yeah, we don't do that.
You're covering one problem and creating another problem.
A single, a transaction with your Visa card, you can make, I think, 100,000 or 200,000 Visa card transactions before you use up the energy that you use up for a single Bitcoin transaction. It is colossal. So Germany is a country that has put a lot of solar panels on the roofs early on because they funded early on. They got a lot of funds from the government to put them on anyway. So Germany is probably in Europe the country with the largest percentage of solar power. Now the entire contribution of solar power in Germany has been basically annulled by the Bitcoin operation. They take more energy out of the worldwide energy system than Germany's solar panels put into it. And to me, that is a catastrophic statement to make. It doesn't matter where they do it. It doesn't matter if they put solar panels on it to make it run. It is a crime. It should be disbanded. It's just
looking at the perspective again of trying to decentralize the power of the bank. So, do you believe it could be at least the start of a transition to something? Because I see the thing with the banks being a cool thing, at least you getting the banks kind of out of the equation. I don't know. I don't know if I'm being ignorant of that, but do you see potential for now we know that we can do something. Let's try to find.
I disagree, because I think that one of the key functions of a democracy is to run its central bank, its national bank, right? Which drives a lot of the the economic machinery in this country is defined by it. And so politics can have an influence over it. Right? We can raise or lower interest rates, and we can interact. We can make more capital available to the people. And all this goes to the wayside if you take this power away from democratically elected governments to do that. With Bitcoin is highly anti-democratic because it does not. The consequences of your Bitcoin money are happening somewhere else, in some Bitcoin mining town in Siberia or in China, whatever it is. So you're sitting in your community here, and what happens in your Bitcoin wallet is completely unrelated to the health of the economy around you. You're basically a parasite in your community. And I call it a parasite because some of these people got filthy rich. They put $10,000 into Bitcoin in 2012 or something like this, and now they have 100 million, right? Why should this person have the right to use 100 million of purchasing power to lay claim on our resources in our community? Go to hell with your Bitcoin. Go to hell, you know. I'm really angry about these people because one of the reasons we have such a housing crisis in New Zealand, housing crisis in terms of that a house that used to cost $400,000 is now worth whatever it's called to be worth $1.5 million or something, right?
Yeah.
Why do we have that? Because there are many people out there who can pay that much. That's the only reason, right? If it's a market-driven thing, right? So if there are people who have millions coming out their pockets, they'll bid the price up of the houses until they can buy that house against somebody else who's also got so much money, right? The only reason that working-class people who work for a living can't buy a house anymore and basically also can't pay the rent anymore is the fact that there are many rich others. And the Bitcoin thing makes it a crime in my mind because the way the wealth of Bitcoin rises is by people believing in this currency. It rises completely decontextualized from the society where you're in. You're sitting next to someone in the cafe and that person has 10 million in his bank because he has some coin, some Bitcoin.
Bought it at the right time.
And then you want to buy a house for 400,000. He says, no, I'll offer $1 million. And you're out, you know. Nah. I'm sorry. And on top of it, using up all the energy.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, whatever. You know, it's using up all the energy. You know, it's out of political control. I want the economy to be democratically controllable in a way. We can, you know, yeah.
I've never heard that before, or thought that's never crossed my mind.
But see, that's the beauty of talking to people who understand how it goes. Because, like, in my view. I get what you say, especially about the bank thing, but I straight away connect with how corrupted my country is. Yeah. So like I don't believe in the bank system. You know, I don't believe in those people. So like even being a democratic way, I know kind of like, it would be great. I think it was Anna who said that like the National Bank in New Zealand is run by Australians.
No, the Bank of New Zealand.
The Bank of New Zealand, sorry.
The BNZ,
Yes, you know, like so there's always this thing with like people putting the fingers in.
And of course we can change this. So we have a political system that could change that. You know, if they had the power and the will, we could change that. It is in our electoral capability to elect people to change that for us. And the other thing, of course, is a big thing that banks do is to lend money for you to build a house, right? And on Bitcoin, you cannot do that because Bitcoin price goes up and down so much that if you had taken out a loan in Bitcoin in 2015, I pick a number now, you take a loan out to build a house and 5 years later you want to pay it back. Well, Bitcoin is you cannot pay that loan back. Bitcoin is not a system. It's an by design unstable currency. It's by design a currency that goes up like a pyramid scheme. You can never repay that loan, right?
Because it goes from being $500,000 to
$100 million, right?
Yeah.
So it is not functional as a value creation. Every time you go to a local bank, you go to Westpac, whatever, and you take a loan out to build a house, Westpac creates that money. That money wasn't there before. Westpac creates that money. They have maybe about 10% of the money they give you, they have somewhere in the deposits, about 10% maybe. The rest they create by the stroke of a signature. Now they created $400,000. They put it into your bank account as a number there, and then you can spend it and build your house for it, right? The money was created, and then you can create the value of the house with it by paying the workers to build your house and all this stuff. The money was created. Then you eventually work for it and you pay this money back, and by the time you pay the money back, this money kind of it ceases. The bank cancels the money basically, you know. So it's interesting. So every time you take a loan, you create a value token that allows you to then build the house. And Bitcoin doesn't work like that. Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme.
Wow.
Sorry.
I love it. I actually,
that's a good.
you were in the Seagull magazine just recently.
Yeah, something
quoted about Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and I was like, all right, I want to go in there and talk about Bitcoin. I've been waiting for it to come up, and then I hear you talk about it.
That's my opinion.
Turns out I know nothing about Bitcoin.
there are intelligent people out there in the community who will tell you the opposite.
And that's the thing, especially nowadays that we go on YouTube and like there's a lot of people explaining what Bitcoin is. That's the thing, they explain how it works, but many of them explain the damage to the other
consequences,
people. I think it's something.
Graphics cards, mate, they skyrocketed in price because that's what they use to
if you're a gamer, you're to pay more for the card.
Graphics. Some of these graphics cards are worth like $8,000, $10,000 now because of that.
The NFTs thing, is that what you're talking about?
No, the computer components.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Right. Let's not even go into the NFTs then.
No. Taylor probably noticed the cost of it when he bought 2 for that computer over there. He was like, geez, how much are these things worth nowadays?
Thomas, I wanna. We've been talking for 2 hours and a half. Look how amazing
fantastic.
This is.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. We just scratched the surface, I think.
I know, right? I have. I think you're gonna have to come back. I have a question that I wanna finish with, but I just would like to give you space and like to share something that we haven't touched on yet, or you would like to bring it back and just put it on the table before I ask you one more last thing.
Yeah, well, I want to shout out for the young people in our community. Many of the young people that I had the privilege of being involved with at our school that have blown me away with what they're doing in life now, what came out of them, and what became of them, what they're capable of doing. That's fantastic, and I was privileged to be a teacher here and being involved with some of them. Fantastic. And I think the hopes that I have are with the young people. I mean, where else would they lie? I mean, you're young people compared to me.
Thank you.
Yes,
the first time my hopes that young on the show.
Yes, you were. Yeah, Fabian was also called young, but the other day. Anyway, so shout out to the young people. And one more point. One of the farewell dinners for the year 13s, my last year 13 class that I had, I said to them, look, if you want anybody to fight with you, pick on the old people, because there's this truth, like you are too young to have much yet to lose, and I'm too old to have much left to lose. So together we can be radicals. And so I think there's a wisdom in there that old people have done it all, this and that. We're no longer so afraid of losing stuff. If we want to change this world for the better, the young and the old can work out. The people in the middle, they are caught in a mortgage. If my paycheck doesn't come in tomorrow, it doesn't work out. I'm kind of squeezed. So the middle are the people who are keeping us on rail to oblivion, maybe, because they can't change, right? But the old and the young ones can maybe push it. So young folks pick on the old ones to say, come with me. Well, I need your experience, but together we're going to kick
nice. So, the last question gets, it's pretty much on the same vibe, but I think you can add some gems there. It's from Dane. He asked right at the start of the show, and I was kind of saving this one for the end. Yeah. Thomas, you seem to be someone who believes in humanity. What would you say for these people who always see the cup half empty?
Well, I probably belong to those as well, because I don't see the cup full at the moment. I see the cup full of massive problems that we have to solve. But he means it probably differently, that people are not satisfied, I guess. Some people are never happy with what they have. I guess that's probably what the question is. Like I need more. I need another. I have this yacht with like a 100 horse engine. I need a bigger one, the 1,000 horse engine. People who are not happy. I think, what should I say to them? I mean, go traveling. Go to the third world. And then look at your cup again. Every measurement from physics, which is interesting, to economy, to the human spheres, any measurement, any comparison is a relative comparison. There's no absolute of how full a cup needs to be. Everything is relative, right? The universe doesn't have a center. There's no absolute space point against which we measure speeds or anything like this. Everything is relative to something else. One of the experiments that I always do in my mind is I conceptualize a completely empty universe. If you can, like a completely empty one. Then you put one thing in there. You put one, say an electron in there, whatever. You put one thing in there. what can this one thing know about itself? Not very much. It doesn't know how big it is, because there's nothing to scale against. How big am I? Who am I? Whatever. There's nothing to compare with, you know. And if you play this game a bit longer, you go like, well, actually, anything you're going to say is only valid in relation to another thing, right? And so the cup is half empty compared to what? You know, what is it talking about, right? So, yeah, everything is relativity theory. Yeah.
Brett, would you like to add something or ask something before we wrap it up? This has been great.
No. I just there was this one thing that I did want to say that I found really interesting, because I was as you explained it, and then you moved away from it, and I was sort of it's not that I wasn't listening to you. I was thinking about it. Thinking about what you had said previous, and it was about that whole inflation problem, right? Because you sort of explained it. And then it sort of like drifted off to like a different.
Please
sort
bring
of
it
arc.
back.
But no. I just thought that was really interesting. I've got a good friend, and he's just like, inflation's the worst. I don't know why the governments always want, you know, like they measure. They measure the
that's a
economy.
different thing, though. Yeah. So you're talking about inflation, like the devaluation of money.
Well, they were always
or the economic growth.
Economic growth.
That's it. Yeah. So economic growth.
Is that not the same as inflation?
No, not at all. No. Inflation is.
We were wrapping up. We're back.
That's good. No.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, it's good. So yeah, there are two things. Generally speaking, economies the economic system that we're in, that we've been living in, that I've been living in all my life and you've been living in all your life, is a system that's dependent on economic growth. If growth doesn't happen, loans can't be repaid back with interest. And then things cascade into, it doesn't work, right? The system doesn't cope with with the economy that goes sideways. That is a long time not possible in a system that depends on everything has to grow in order to pay back loans with interest and you know. Anyway, so when you hear politicians talk about the fact, we got 3% growth, you know, great, you know. But of course, that is the cancer that kills us eventually, because we're living on a single planet. We're already, every year, I think this year we crossed the threshold of using all the resources that this planet can give us in April for the whole year, right? So in April, we're beyond it. From April onwards, everything the rest of the year is on borrowed resources that we are depleting quickly, that will never be there after again. It's a one-time inheritance of stuff we have. We eat up and it's gone. So growing the economy further worldwide, no. You know, maybe in pockets here at the expense of something else, but you can only grow now at the expense of something else. Well, at whose expense do you wish to grow, and explain this to the other people, why you should be growing and the others not? Interesting. So inflation different, so we had in Germany, history.
Hyperinflation.
Hyperinflation. My mum, I still had an old wooden box, and there were letters in that box, where the envelope was plastered full of 1 billion mark stamps. Like, there was just enough space for the address on that envelope. Every stamp was 1 billion marks. And there was an envelope that had to travel from somewhere to somewhere. Don't ask. So inflation became catastrophic. Zimbabwe, Germany back in the day can run out of control, and people print money, and your salary was up to $1 million a day, whatever. You know, but it means nothing because you can't buy anything for it, and so that can happen. I don't think that will end up there, but of course we right now have an inflationary period because resources are not there. You know, when resources are getting scarce, prices go up. And what makes me mad about the current situation is that the oil companies are loving it, of course, because the oil price is up because the production has been curtailed due to Russia not being on the market, Ukraine, etc. So the production is a shortfall there. So now a barrel of oil they could sell before for $40-50, they can now get 124 or something. And they are creaming it, right? Even though every single barrel of this oil destroys our climate. So you know, there's a problem in itself.
I'm glad you explained that. Because now I know the difference between the two.
Yes, that's different. Yeah.
Can the government actually do something about it? Because we complain a lot about the prices of the petrol and everything, but then there's a problem coming before that.
Sure. Yeah, interesting. So I think there are a couple of things there. So our government can't do much about a global resource crisis. Our government has not much they can offer there to have a global resource crisis, right? There's a global resource crisis because of political shenanigans, Putin, the war, whatever. But there's a bigger global resource crisis that we have to actually embrace, which is the resource crisis that comes our way if we actually deliberately using less resources to solve the climate problem, which if we don't solve, we'll pull the carpet under us completely, right? So we have to learn to embrace a resource crisis of our own making in order to solve the climate crisis in some way. We have to get rid of the fossil fuels, right? We can't use them anymore in that extent, which also means that lots of other things will have to happen, right? And I think the farmers in New Zealand, the dairy farmers, should look very, very hard at their business model going forward. I think they will be outpaced very quickly by artificially created milk proteins. They're now having factory-created milk proteins from plant-based fermentation process. The proteins are identical to the milk proteins. That means a company that buys our milk powder today can buy the milk powder from that factory tomorrow at a far reduced cost, because they're needing 1 liter for every 100 liters the cows need. They're needing 1 liter. So it's a process that is far less resource hungry. It will be far cheaper to produce and super quality. And so the people who think they're going to sell milk powder in 10 years' time here, they better pay attention. What happened to Kodak when the digital cameras came about? That's going to happen to the milk companies. Anyway, so things will change dramatically, and it will happen. It's just, you better look out what else you could do with your land, which would be actually good for the land. Plant something we can actually eat directly, which would be much, much, much better. The world needs food grown directly, and think intelligently what other stuff you can grow. Bamboo, maybe. You can make so much out of bamboo fibers.
Would be able to restore the land, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Good. Give it a bit of time. It'll come right. It'll come right.
Because I worry they go that we make the soil sterile, blah blah blah.
No.
We can make it good again.
I'm sure it'll come right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's finish on the hopeful side of
very
the story.
positive.
Sure.
That was very good. Thomas.
Sure.
What a pleasure, man.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck with your station. You're doing fantastically well, and you deserve the accolade you get and the price you get for your good work you do. Fantastic, guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Brett, did you have fun?
I have. I've learned a lot tonight, actually.
That was good,
I've had the last 2 in a row, and they were both very, very informative. One very informative for the mind, and then the other one for the planet. So they're a great little combo there for.
Yeah, I like Stefan. I know
Lizzie's
Stefan as well.
birthday.
He's a good guy. Stefan's a good guy. Yeah.
Fantastic.
He knows a lot about the mind.
Thank you so much. And for you at home, I really hope you enjoyed the show. Wow. We did. We learned a lot. It's been a great journey. I think we're all entitled to have opinions in life, and it's all good. But when you have people like Thomas, like Stefan, people who know the facts, who have been studying things and can tell us, well, I'm not sure if you're right about this, and then there's this development of humility, of understanding that maybe, we should accept that sometimes we don't know at all. So these shows have been fantastic, and I'm learning a lot. I'm changing my mind, which is good for a lot of things, and I'm learning that, we have a lot to do, but we gotta do it. We gotta do it.
Yep.
So thank you so much. I hope you guys are enjoying this show. We're live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. On Wednesday, we have Lana Garland. She's a fantastic, well-known Kiwi personality. She's been on TV. She's done a bunch of cool stuff, and she's coming to talk about a new magazine that is coming up in our community, and it's going to be great. And on Friday, we have Mark from Coffee Lala. We didn't touch on mining tonight, and maybe it was on purpose because we have someone coming to talk a lot about that on Friday. Okay, so stay tuned, stay with us, keep sending your messages. For all the teenagers from the Mercury Bay Area School coming to our chat and sending our shout outs, thank you so much. Thanks for subscribing to our channel. And are you guys happy there? Should we go home and rest? That's us. See you on Wednesday. Bye.